Hello, my fellow Westorians. Welcome back to Valar Rereadis for Dunk and Egg. It's the Mystery Night, Part 2. Let's see what today brings us, my fellow Westorians. As you can see, if you're watching, and if you're not watching, I'll tell you. Sean of House Beard is sitting next to me. Look at this, right here, just like old times in the house. And we have, in fact, a studio audience of one. Shout out to Rita of the Copper Main over here, our live studio audience. That's right. So we're having a good time here.
In the audience too.
Yeah, you're right. There are some cats in the audience. Yep. And there are some of you in the audience as well. Thanks to those of you who are watching live today on YouTube. We do this every Sunday at 3 Eastern. That's our usual. Those of you who come regularly know that. But if you listen on podcast, you might not know that. So I thought I'd throw that out there. Well, Sean, you're here. But that doesn't preclude you from having an inventive beverage that appears to be a strange pinkish color. Looks a little bit like watered down Pepto-Bismol, I gotta say.
I'd say it's closer to purple than pink. It's not far from my typical mix. Cat's going crazy over there.
Yeah.
What do we have? The protein berry naked drink.
Okay.
And orange mango sparkling ice. And of course,
Mountain Dew.
For the caffeine.
the foundation of all bearded beverages.
Sometimes Dr. Pepper's the foundation.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. You mix it up a little bit with your mixing up. I have a somewhat standard, but not entirely standard, chocolate coffee here. This one's iced. So you may hear my ice clinking today.
Have you tried Mountain Dew in your coffee?
Oh, God.
Do people put lemon in their coffee? Is there orange flavored coffee?
Yeah.
Citrus in coffee.
Yeah, those things happen, but not.
We have a Coke coffee.
Not in my cup. So thanks as well to Nina, Good Queen Alley with 1L.tumblr.com. I have used a few extra of her notes this time because we've been doing so much hanging out here with friends in town. But we have plenty of things to cover today. Over on her blog, she did an interesting post on the way the faith works in terms of local customs and syncretism. Syncretism is sort of like mashing religious ideals together, disparate but perhaps similar, meaning they come from different origins. Like if you take some, like in the modern world, like some aspects of Christianity and Judaism are overlapping or have been adopted one from the other. Yeah, not some, yeah, more than a few. So then there's countless other examples like that. And of course, this is a real thing. So it's a fun thing to explore in terms of Westeros. One example being the odd phrase, Lord of the Seven Hells, that we heard in the last story, The Sworn Sword. That's a good example of what might be local customs getting adopted, and that's a form of syncretism. So it's a really cool topic. Anyway, as well, I want to shout out our friends over in Facebook and Slack and Discord and all of our places to chat about the episodes, as well as thank y'all who come here live to participate. Flick has been having a few problems. If you're one of our regular Flick users, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. I've been trying to figure it out, but they're doing some transitions with their company, and it's made the site intermittently down. So I apologize if those of you who have posted on Flick, I know there's some really good questions and takes on there that I haven't been able to access for about 2 weeks. So it's come back briefly, and I was able to access it for a minute, and then it went down again. So I'm sure it'll be back. Once we get that settled, we'll get y'all's great takes and deliver them here. But if you wanted to head over to one of the other sites, if the problems linger, you certainly have that option, and I encourage you to do that if that problem continues. Thanks as well to those of you who support us on Patreon. We have been thinking about some changes, trying to revamp the Patreon and maybe do a few things differently. The future is going to change how we do a few things, given new material, things like that. So if you have suggestions, any ideas, now's the time to get them in. But we're still pretty early in the process of figuring these things out, so don't expect anything big to change anytime soon. Probably won't be any big changes later either, but there will be some changes. Shout out to Mrs. Duncan Natal for the super chat. It says, welcome back, friends, with the old tree emoji, falling star emoji. How perfect for Dunk. Nice. Very good. All right. So my first question, Sean, can we start calling him Plum Raven instead of Blood Raven?
Good.
Because it's pretty similar color, right? You know? All right. So that was easy. You're a quick yes on that one.
Should I put up a fight?
Nah, I don't
Plum
think
Raven,
so.
that's stupid. Okay, fine.
Don't make him mad. Yeah, no arguing with Bloodraven. The feast. Let's start with the feast. That's where we left off. And well, one of the first things you notice, of course, once you get to the food description, is
it's on.
It's on, right?
We talked earlier in the first book, especially because it was earlier in Martin's writing career. Thinking about if we noticed any evolution in his style or whatever. And that was something that, at this point, is now very clear that he is decided to go on and on with food descriptions.
It's his thing, yeah. He likes to do it. Now, interestingly, there was something about the wedding pie that Nina noticed that I kind of noticed too, but I didn't have a suggestion for what it meant. So we'll go with her interpretation as a possibility. I like it. I'm not sure it's what George meant, but I do like it. So it certainly fits, which is that normally when we see a wedding pie, normally. We haven't seen a lot of wedding pies, but this one's unusual that there's a bunch of different kinds of birds. Whereas before we associate with just doves, right? Like that's how the big wedding pie at the purple wedding was. And the issue with it is that, well, it's maybe a sign that there's no... there's a difference. It's like showing the myriad of options, all the different kind of people, all the different backgrounds. It's more of a mishmash rather than a straightforward, united thing. And that kind of reflects all the different goals and aspects of this situation here, all the different personalities. And it's pretty cool. I like that interpretation. If you all have a different interpretation, feel free to let us know. That would be very nice. There could be more to it. We always value your takes.
I feel like one of the characters even mentioned something like, this is how it should be, different types of birds. I wish I could remember a little bit better, but I think one of the characters said something about it representing the different aspects of a marriage or something like that.
Yeah, we actually have a take on that a little bit later, so that's cool to kind of link those ideas. Here's a line that is almost, if not entirely, funny on reread. Our first quote of the day.
The crowd was larger than Dunk had anticipated, and from the looks of it, some of the guests had come a very long way. He and Egg had not been around so many lords and knights since Ashford Meadow. There was no way to guess who else might turn up next. We should have stayed out in the hedges, sleeping under the trees. If I am recognized.
So, a lot of layers to that. It isn't just one joke. There's 5 jokes in there.
If
he's recognized. Yeah, so that's one thing. It's like, dude, Plum Raven is like, I know who you are, and he's kind of like, you're not very incognito. Just all these hints. It's like you're very easy to notice. You just can't hide.
And he has a little notoriety surrounding him too that maybe everyone isn't aware of, but certainly some people are.
He's definitely the only 7-foot knight with a bald squire walking around, right? That is. So I can go out on a limb and say that I haven't actually checked. But I'm pretty sure. The other thing, though, is it's kind of funny, is that in this company, having killed or being partly responsible for the death of Baelor, that's a plus in this company. They're all Blackfyre loyal. So that's the guy that helped kill Baelor. Actually, you're cool. That might be why he's there, right? Some people think, he's tired of people crapping on him for being the guy that killed Baelor. He's come to join us.
Yeah.
It actually looks like it looked like that from the outside, which is proud of Bloodraven's concern too. He's like, okay, I don't know about this guy. I can see why he's here. So there's a motive. There's a. It's not just random. It looks like he could have a purpose to being there.
It does explain some of Bloodraven's, I don't know how to say this, but testing him. Some of the questions he asks and comments he makes. We even wondered if Kyle the cat maybe was part of it.
Yeah.
You could see that Bloodraven is trying to place Dunk.
Yeah.
And I also had mentioned earlier that I don't know. I thought it was a little awkward to have Dunk wondering if someone recognized him. I thought it would be obvious that people would recognize him. It almost bothered me a little how Martin was handling that. But now, again, thinking about it further, as we do, right? Certainly a bunch of people did recognize him. And it made sense that he was heir to them, right? It wasn't suspicious or something Dunk needed to fear. Dunk doesn't realize it. But it probably makes him more welcome there than he might realize,
That's a good point, yeah. And that might be worried. There's another concern Bloodraven might have. He's like, well, even if he is here by accident, they might recruit him. They might successfully recruit him or something. Bloodraven doesn't know Dunk's personality. We know from Dunk's personality that that's pretty out of the question.
Yeah.
But they don't. But Bloodraven doesn't know that. Neither do like all these other people here. They don't know Dunk's personality. They don't know him from Adam. They don't know him at all.
In fact, Underleaf.
Yeah,
right?
Uthor. Yeah.
Who did recognize him?
Yes.
Right. He wasn't even there, but he still knew who he must be.
Yeah.
Still, I knew nothing of his character. It's like, hey, join me, help me set up these bets.
You know, like if he knew of his character, he would not have suggested like
yeah.
that kind of. Yeah, he's like, no, Dunk would never do that. I mean, and just more on Baelor. Like this is the hammer and the anvil. Like this is possibly the commander that caused the most deaths.
Among
like his
the
leadership.
allies of this.
So like everyone in
company.
this group can lay a death or two at the feet of Baelor and be like, yeah, that guy, like screw him, you know, good job taking care of him, even though he obviously didn't deal the death blow. It's still the blame is still there. And
you can also see how the story might be spread. Everyone isn't going to know all the nuanced details.
Yeah,
but they might know. Wasn't that the guy? Even someone there that like knew the story might tell someone else. He's the one that got Baelor killed. And they might even know more details, but not say it when they're trying to tell other people, you know?
Yeah, and I think if Bloodraven had knew right away, if he knew what Dunk's intent was, he would, instead of feeling him out, he would have been just like, dude, you need to leave.
Yeah.
Get the hell out of here and take, especially because you've got him with you. Like, get him, take Egg and go.
He might even been willing to reveal his identity, or even under the guise of some other identity or intention, kicked him out or scared him off.
Absolutely. I think that's very true. And like he couldn't risk himself just to save Dunk. Yeah. Egg, on the other hand, that's different. But it didn't come to that. He already, you know, he managed to not reveal himself. So. What's going on?
Something you were doing, Sean. When you move your phone there or touch it on the chair, it keeps crackling. I've been trying to troubleshoot. Like right there, it's super crackled.
I wonder if it's. I don't think it's my phone. I think it's bumping the cord. I bet that's what it is.
That's
if I shift my chair, move the cord, I think it's just touching the chair or my knee.
Exactly.
I'll just be more cautious of it. Okay.
That's why I've been.
Okay. Let's have this next quote. We have the one from Maynard Plumm talking about this very subject.
Sir Duncan, you appear to be attracting a deal of attention, Sir Maynard Plumm observed as Lord Viril and his party went parading past them toward places of high honor at the top of the hall. Those girls up on the dais cannot seem to take their eyes off of you. I'll wager they have never seen a man so big. Even seated, you're half a head taller than any man in the hall.
He's like, you're easy to spot. You are recognizable. Once someone has seen you, they will forever recognize you ever after. So Dunk is worrying if you might be right. He's well past that. Like, it's really funny. He's like, will they notice me? Like, dude.
Another thought that I think Reed and I talked about this here actually, that Bloodraven might be concerned for himself. All these eyes on Dunk, Bloodraven might be like, my glamour gonna hold up?
Oh,
There's
yeah,
really more
yeah,
attention
like
on
hanging
me than
around
I thought there was gonna be, right?
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. Yeah, he doesn't need to draw attention to the guy he's sitting next to. Like, yeah, just
keep looking at the tall, handsome guy. Yeah.
That's so funny. So speaking of recognizing people, here comes none other than the future perpetrator of the Red Wedding. Lord Frey of the Crossing was a lean man, elegant in blue and gray. His heir, a chinless boy of 4 whose nose was dripping snot. That's pretty evocative and gross. This comes as part of the ceremony. It's accompanied by toasting, led by the father of the bride, this Lord Frey, the lean, elegant man, not the snotty son. The first toast is really sneaky. He just says, the king, to the king. He doesn't say King Ares. He doesn't say, this leaves it open. It's ambiguous. They can be like, yeah, even Sir Glendon drinks to that because it's the king, right? Like, they get to make their own choice on who that means.
Similar to Eustace and other characters.
Good call, yes.
The Sworn Sword, they were generic about how they talked about the rebellion.
Yes.
I fought in the rebellion, you know.
That's a very good call, yeah, because there's as long as you don't name the side or name names, no one can say you mean otherwise. It's like, it's technically not
People
treasonous
get to
talk.
assume what they want.
Yeah. So he's more specific when it comes to toasting the hand. Brynden Rivers, he says, I give you the king's hand, Brynden Rivers. May the crone's lamp light his path to wisdom. He's probably wiser than most anyone else in the hall. So he might already have his crone's lamp well lit there. But it's like half of the people in the crowd don't drink. It's a huge number. It reminds me of a lot of Obara and that scene in Sunspear through Areo Hota's point of view, and he's specifically like watching to see who doesn't drink. He's like not drinking himself. He's like, all right, who's gonna turn their cups over? He's very careful to watch for that, and a lot of them don't even. They're just like, like make it as obvious as they can. And some of them just don't drink, but some of them dump their cups out. And Glendon does that too. He's like, dumps the whole thing out. So Dunk's this like, seems like it'd be dangerous not to drink.
Yeah.
This is Bloodraven sitting right next to him.
It's an interesting thing to think about too, from like a writing perspective. This story is, for the most part, it's from Dunk's perspective.
Yeah,
we don't get any stories or whatever out where Dunk isn't present. However, we might be told things that are happening in Dunk's presence that he doesn't necessarily take note of.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it doesn't seem like Dunk was particularly aware of who did or didn't drink, even though we were told as an audience.
Yeah. So it's also interesting too the way some other people react, like Uthor, Sir Uthor Underleaf. We'll talk about him more next time. The snail. There's a lot to say about him. Some people even think he's the more consummate mystery knight than just about anyone here. Anyway, more like I said, more on him later. But he says the right thing when Glendon's like, I don't drink to a bastard, and he's like, no, he's not a bastard. He was legitimized, drinks up, and that's pretty neat. But what I love too is Bloodraven drinks deep himself. He's like, it's a waste of good wine, just drinks himself.
When someone else dumped the wine out, it's like,
yeah,
waste of good wine.
Good waste of wine there. Later, when everyone is drunk and passed out, just about everyone is drunk and passed out, Dunk comes back down, and Maynard's like the only one still there. At least, probably because he's not wasted. Like, he's a spy. He shouldn't be getting wasted, right?
Well, not only because he's not wasted, but because he's a spy.
Right.
I think
he's
I
probably
bring
good
this
at
up
it
later
too.
in a document, but he's waiting to see who came down for an abetting, who comes down with who specifically.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if Dunk and the Fiddler had come back down together.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't end up, but that could have easily happened. Or Dunk could have never come back down until the next morning.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot that he can.
He wants to see what
draw
happens.
by,
Yeah. It's a great point. Yeah.
Who comes back through with whom? Leftover drunken conversations people still have. It makes a lot of sense. He's the last one lingering around as a spy,
Yeah, it really does. And Nina and I were joking about this too. We were kind of talking about it, this drinking thing, and she points out we're pretty sure the only time he drinks is when it's toasted to him. It's the only time he explicitly drinks. It's like, all right, I'll drink to me. But the rest of the time, like, I don't know. Now, there's some more Red Wedding vibes here. Of course, they're all over. We probably won't be able to mention them all because we probably won't catch them all. There's so many good Red Wedding vibes here. It's funny to say good Red Wedding vibes here. But one of them, of course, is the Lord Frey being right here, both the new and the old Lord Frey. But we also have Lady Verwell crying, which is interesting because the Verwells are one of the more prominent houses here just because they get mentioned a lot, not necessarily because they're a really prominent house out in Westeros in terms of their level of power. But the reason for that I think is interesting is at the end of the story, we have a Verwell man bragging that he was one of the spies. Now, he just could have just been a random guy that was bribed and was a spy, but maybe the Verwells were in on it too. Like, we've wondered that about the Freys. We wondered that about other people. Like, there's opportunities to betray this thing because it's not well made. So, like, who wants to back this thing when they can betray it and gain more regard that way? Like, man, that may be a better play than going down with the ship is like, well, this is not going to go well, so why don't I get ahead of this and, be on the winning side anyway. So the fact that Lady Verwell's crying reminds me of Rosalind, the one who marries Edmure Tully,
Yeah.
right? She's crying and Catelyn just brushes that off as well. Yeah, this is terrifying. Like, it's a wedding, like all these men, like the betting is coming. She's easily able to ascribe rational reasons why this woman would be crying. But later we're like, oh, she knew about the massacre. She knew this was going to happen. And it's like, no wonder she's crying at her wedding. Like, damn, that's an awful thing to know it's coming and to be like trying to maintain your composure and all that. So my guess is here, maybe Lady Verwell knew as well. And I mean, not that there was a slaughter here, but that it reminds me of that. And given all the other Red Wedding vibes, it feels like that's definitely worth a mention.
She could easily be afraid for her future,
Taking the wrong side, yeah.
Like, already, it's probably a precarious situation for these brides being betrothed to older men that they don't really know. It's already a tough scenario. But when they're also aware of the idea that it's tied up in a I don't know, revolt of sorts. There's a lot of extra uncertainty. Like, at least, even if it's some old dude you don't know or love, at least you'll be secure. But when you won't even at least be secure,
you're trading away all your like your pride and your personality and your honor and yourself for not much. Like if you get comfort and safety, that is at least something. But
I had another thought, by the way, another potential parallel to the Red Wedding. I'm not sure about this.
Okay.
But I thought it was odd when they went up for the betting that among the things that Martin described, one of them was the suit of armor in his chambers.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too.
And it stood out a little bit to me. I even went back and listened to it because I thought maybe there'd be some description that would like make us realize, oh, that was so-and-so's armor that they wore in some battle or another. But it was very generic. It was like gold inlaid armor.
It was just super bling armor. Yeah,
but it made me think, well, how common would it be to keep your suit of armor in your bedchambers? Maybe completely common, but maybe he's ready for action.
Maybe, yeah.
It reminds me, I can't quite remember if it played out like this in the book, but in the show, you remember Caitlin notices that Roose is wearing chainmail.
Yeah, that is how it is
like,
in the show.
Oh, no.
In the books too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that should have been a clue. He's got his armor in his bedchamber.
Mm.
Something's about to go down.
That's interesting. One thing, I didn't think of that. It's a cool idea. For me, it was just like he's setting the stage by describing a bunch of things, which doesn't draw too much attention to one of those things being the privy and all that. But, if you only point out one object in the room, then, kind of focus on that. But we'll get back to that scene in a minute as well. Now, another thing that's cool here is this is not the twins, right? That's the one comparison to the Red Wedding that doesn't carry over, even though there's phrase. It's at, White Walls, not the twins. And the food is much nicer. We talk about the food description. That's one of the things you look back on the Red Wedding is like, boy, this food was awful. Like, what is going on with these weird dishes that sound super disgusting? And even Rob and Catelyn comment on how awful the food is. It's like so weird. But here, like you said, this is the good stuff, or at least it's the really rich sounding stuff. Some of it sounds not that good actually, but it's not like gross sounding, like meant to offend people or meant to provoke a reaction. But one thing I really love is Dunk just being good. He thinks of egg. He's like, I wonder if the kid's getting enough food. I better stash a chicken in my pocket.
Yeah.
Dunk probably has pretty big pockets. I wonder how he could probably stuff a few chickens in there. But
I thought it was a fish.
He stuffed a bunch of things in there.
But it was also like a cheese that he specifically said was smelly.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, he's gonna turn into Bennis the Brown.
It even said that, right?
Funky smelling food
compared.
in his pockets.
That's funny. So the food's not a clue to what's going on. In other words, the food is, like you said, it's kind of standard George R. R. Martin, like, go for it. Like, yeah, this is fun, but it's standardness in that sense. It doesn't provide any clues. So, but there are clues elsewhere in this feast. Like John the Fiddler just straight up says this. I guess you could say the looser he gets, looser and looser the more he drinks, which is pretty normal, right? Like people do lose their inhibitions and talk more when they're drinking. That's very normal. And the pretense of who he is kind of starts to slip more and more. Here's a quote.
So John the Fiddler proposed the final toast to my brave brothers. I know that they are smiling tonight. So to the naive, this may generically mean his brothers in arms, his fellow hedge knights, and it may even give some plausible deniability to Dunk and others, maybe the willing naive. But he does have some specific brothers.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, it's true. It's really interesting. And it's like it's another one. It's like to his brave brothers, like to the king. Like it's still very vague, right? But once you're on the clue, it's like, oh, he's talking about the two that he saw dead in his dreams. Aegon and Aemon slain on the red grass field. They mocked him for this, and then they were killed. And at that point, he was young. He was only 7 years old. We don't know how many dreams he had that had come true. Probably that wasn't the first one. But that one was almost certainly one of the biggest ones. He's like, wow, that came true. And over time, now he says he's 22. You got to figure by now, over age 22, he's probably had a lot of his dreams come true. So he's just got more and more confidence in this, even though he got this one wrong and other aspects of it wrong. He has a reason to trust his dreams. He's not crazy.
That is interesting to think about, especially, we talked a lot about dreams and how that it might affect your outlook on life, prophetic dreams specifically. I remember in the first book I had in my notes, I had what other dreams has Daeron had? And in this one, I had, what other dreams has Daemon had? You know?
Yeah, right, yeah.
And it is the ones that are brought to our attention are these sort of big, sweeping, kingdom-changing, potentially dreams, right? A prince is going to die, or a dragon's going to hatch, or something like that. And those also maybe are the ones that are tougher to interpret or more likely to change someone's life course. But you imagine they might be reinforced if you've had a bunch of smaller dreams, which also, like many prophecies, could be misleading. Like you dreamed you were going to have eggs for breakfast. Well, odds are you will eventually have eggs for breakfast, but it happens to happen the next day, especially if several of your dreams happen relatively quickly afterwards. It might make you assume that the dragon hatching is also going to happen relatively quickly after.
Yeah.
And you don't know that it's meant 70 years later or whatever, so.
And there's details too, like that lacking. Like maybe for all we know in the dream, like he saw more detail that came true, like arrows or something like that. Some other like detail that came true that he has a hard time, or they just didn't make it into the into the text here. But think about Bloodraven, Plumraven sitting here hearing that quote, like, you mean the guys I shot down? Like, I did that,
Those brothers? Yeah.
Am I going to have to do that to you as well? Don't make me shoot you down, too. Or better yet, since I didn't bring my bow, we'll do something different this time. So he probably felt pretty confident, too. He's like, yeah, this dude, if he's just going to blurt this out, like, this gives me confidence that these guys are not, like, as serious about this as they need to be. So he's probably like, all right. We can take this down without getting too crazy. He can undermine it rather than he can cause it to collapse in on itself. So he creates like it
doesn't necessarily have to come to a violent head.
Yeah, like almost no one dies. Like there's only a few deaths, right? Like the Verwell guy, and then the executions afterwards, and Black Tom, and but yeah, it's like it's a bloodless rebellion. That's why some people put rebellion in quotes on this one, because did it really get going far enough to be that? Like, for shorthand, we call it that. It's the second Blackfyre rebellion. But like when you really get down to it, it's like, this was the second Blackfyre uptick or something. I don't know. Not even an uprising. I was about to say uprising, and that wasn't even conspiracy. That's good. Yeah. Conspiracy, because it did get beyond conspiracy, but not very far beyond conspiracy, I guess. So that's fun. He's like, yeah, this will be easy to undermine because there's so many holes and so many people not getting what they wanted, so many flaws in this situation here that he can exploit those flaws and against each other, against the conspirators.
Would you say they were fomenting?
He's going to turn this whole thing into a Blackfyre black hole. Yeah. So Nina notes this phrase, our true king across the water. Now, this is a pretty important historical context parallel here, which is the Jacobite rebellion. The Jacobites are most likely the main inspiration for the Blackfyres, if not a very heavy inspiration for them, due to the number of overwhelming parallels that come here that just seems likely that George drew a lot from this. There were the legitimate male line descendants of James II, driven out of Britain by the so-called Glorious Revolution, to show secret support for the Jacobite claimants, James II, his son James Francis Edward Stuart. That's 4 first names. James Francis Edward Stuart. And his 2 sons, Charles Edward Stuart and Henry Benedict Stuart, their supporters in Britain would raise a toast to the king while holding their cups over a glass or bowl of water. So they would hold it over water to kind of symbolize they were toasting to the king across the water. And that's pretty neat here. So a different continent. Now we have the Hunchbacked Septon case from last time, or from earlier, and he's more explicit in his support for the Blackfyres and these secret Jacobite toasts. But there's a difference between how nobles are and how street preachers. Like it's just a different thing, right? Different mindset there. And Nina notes very cool here. Glendon even holds his when the toast comes, the one he holds his wine cup, but he holds it out over the water basin. So he's toasting over the water. He's doing that same thing. So this is why Nina can say with confidence that this is a strong historical parallel. I did not catch this on my own, so shout out to her for that one. That's really good. Even more of this. We're going to do an even extended rundown of the Jacobites at the end of this episode. It'll be like the last topic, so kind of our outro topic. So if you're curious, a little more on that will be at the end. But a little more, enough different sort of clue that the Fiddler is from overseas comes from this line.
The Fiddler smelt of oranges and limes with a hint of some strange eastern spice beneath.
A hint of some
Yep.
strange eastern spice. Not a hint, hint. I mean, that word specifically.
It was this was like such a good little bit here because it's another indication that the Fiddler is not just a hedge knight. He even says in other points, I know where Butterwell's kitchens are. You know, like he's just getting whatever he wants. He's getting the best food. He can get it whenever he wants. You know, he has free reign of this castle. He's not just some hedge knight.
Yeah.
But furthermore, he's not from here. He's from the east. You know, it was really good.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Is it's a clue as well with his wealth. Like strange eastern spices, guaranteed they're expensive.
Yeah.
Whatever the spice is, it's expensive.
Yeah, another indication of wealth.
Yeah. But nothing stands out more than his giant amethyst necklace on his chain. Like, what? And it says it brings out the color in his eyes, which is like, okay, so he has purple eyes there.
He even thinks he has egg's eyes.
Yeah. It's like, and some of these clues are not very sneaky. They're like, whoa, you're not, and they're not supposed to be. Like, these guys aren't being cautious, right? That's the point. It's part of the point here. And
if he was really cautious, he should have gouged his own eyes out.
should have worn a mask. And amethyst is also a really striking color for Targaryen eyes that we've seen. It's not usually just, sometimes it's just purple. Like they say purple, but the main colors are like lilac, violet, and amethyst. And amethyst is the one that, to me, personally, really stands out because it's gemstone. It sounds like the gemstone emperors and all that. So it really just sounds out their royalty, their prestige, because of the that's the one that implies the most wealth. Like violets are flowers and lilacs are flowers and purple's just a color, generic, but amethyst is a rare gemstone. It's something else. Here's another irony. Glendon is a contrast to Daemon and Bloodraven. Now, Glendon very exaggeratedly, vehemently asserts his heritage. It's weird that he is tells people that he's legitimate, because that's just impossible. Like, there's no way he was legitimate. Yes, he could be Quentin Ball's son, but there's no way he's not a bastard.
Yeah,
it's odd, almost odd that he pushes this, because there's no one's going to believe him. It's impossible to believe. It's kind of a strange claim, but it just goes to show how fired up he is, how much he wants to be like his father figure. And that's a recurring theme here. It's a really important thing. The father figure theme here is huge. Tyrion said it really well. We dance on the strings of those who came before us, especially when your fathers are powerful lords that have thousands of years of heritage and history that they're proud of, that they're trying to keep. And Glendon, or guys like Gorman Peak, his father isn't really mentioned, but he had 3 castles and lost them, and his house had these castles for thousands of years, and he's the guy that lost them. And it's like, that's, of all the peaks, you're the one that lost the castles, And here we have John the Fiddler trying to claim to be a landless hedge knight, but he's still seated up there with all the famous families and everything, and he doesn't have the aristocratic credentials openly that Glendon Ball is claiming to have. He's like, well, if he's the son of Fireball, he should be up there.
Yeah.
But this guy who has no name at all is just like, yeah, I know where the kitchens are. I can do whatever I want. It's just like, when you really get into it, it's like, wow, yeah, this is so uneven. It just tells you something's going on here, and it's really fun to just dig into that.
There's got to be a little bit of a lot of yes men involved around this, probably on all sides, because even Daemon, on some level, he seems oblivious to how the pairings are being set up too. Does that make sense?
Yes, he does. Not till the end until he's told.
He might not know that much about tournaments, but they just told him, come, you'll win this thing, da-da-da, and he might not necessarily know how much he's being set up for failure. You might be assuming more about the potential success or competence of the people involved.
That's a good point.
And because he does seem to be overly confident about this.
His dreams, he's really relying on his dreams. Yeah, and he doesn't know. Yeah, you're right. He doesn't know these people. He doesn't know Gorman Peak that well. He doesn't know Butterwell. These are people he met within the last month.
And they seem to be surprised. He doesn't even have the sword. Is he his father's son?
Yeah.
No, they don't know. So this is not, that we've said many times, not the best coordinated thing. You can see it from a lot of different angles.
Now some mirroring comes from this moment as well. John the Fiddler, as much as we say he's not his father's son, he does have some of these skills, right? He knows how to talk. He has easy charisma. He has charm. And this is why we made comparisons to Renly. Because this is something Renly's really good at. You see that, like, Renly wasn't on screen a super long time, like, relatively speaking to the size of the series. But in that time, one thing he had was the ability to win people over. Like, unquestionably, that's a powerful trait when you're a leader too, especially in a spot like this when it's like one king versus another, like the one with more charisma. It's a pretty big tool in your arsenal to help get the edge, the manpower advantage, or to bring people to your cause when they're not sure. If they're on the fence, well, I kind of like that guy more, you know. Like if it's a close call, go with the friendlier guy, the one who might do you better in the long run, like be a better leader. You might think that's a sign of a better leader. Now, we know that's not necessarily a sign of a better leader in the long run. And in fact, in this case, Jon's being a bit dishonest because he says to Glendon Ball's like, I would never want to give offense to a son of Fireball. But later on, he's just like, he calls him Fireball's bastard, you know? So he's like, this is just to win him over, right? Like he's also drunk here, but... So, but it worked. You see how well it works. Like Glendon's like, his pride is up. He's angry. He's prickly is a good word here. And where he's constantly getting hammered, people mocking him like, you're not this, you're not that. So when Glendon comes over and he's like irked because Jon's like, I'm going to win the Dragon's Egg. And Jon's like, your boasting is unseemly. He's like, truly, I would never want to give offense to a son of Fireball. And he's like, whoa.
It's hard to stay mad after he compliments you.
Yeah, it's like he was ready to like argue again because that's all he's like most of what he's been doing is picking small fights and getting into arguments and getting mocked.
He kind of has a chip on his shoulder.
That's
right?
a great way to put it.
Or
a ball on his shoulder.
Yeah. And the Fiddler is almost like, look, man, you don't need this chip.
Yeah. It's really smooth. It's like this is a good like leadership trait here to be like diffuse the situation, like this is sort of like an ambassador, something Varys would do, like just smooth it out. He would know exactly what to say to get the guy to be unangry because he knows he reads him and can see what's bothering him, and he knows like the pressure point to hit to like alleviate that.
I want to give him credit. I want to give Daemon credit for being brave too.
Yeah, he is brave
toward the end.
He is,
but I also at the same time I can't decide. For one, brave isn't binary, right? You're not just brave or not brave. Yeah. But I'm thinking about the Ned Stark quote where you have to be scared first to really be brave.
That's true.
I don't think he's ever really scared. He's kind of naive. He just assumes this is all going to work out. He assumes he's the better jouster. He assumes that the rebellion's going to work.
Yeah.
And even when he's like clearly kind of lost his allies and an army surrounding him, he's still willing to charge forward and fight. But I think it's more out of naivete than bravery, you know? Yeah,
you wonder I really, really wonder... And this is something I'd love to hear from you all about too. It's a complete mystery, the Mystery Night. What happens afterwards? We don't know when Daemon II dies in captivity. It's clear that he did because he never wasn't in captivity as far as we know. But was he assassinated in prison? Did he become depressed because he was like, holy crap, I was wrong about so much, and just withered away and died? Like, who knows? We have no idea. But I really wonder. Like,
we know he did die.
Yeah, he had to have died.
A captive, or like
probably.
Is it possible that he became a trusted advisor to the court?
Nah, Bloodraven would never have stood for that. He's just so anti-Blackfyre. We know that the next Blackfyre rebellion was in 219. Hagon, the one that Bloodraven refers to at the end. He's like, well, are they going to kill him? He's like, well, if you kill him, then they'll just crown Hagon.
Yeah.
Which is why I suggest an assassination in prison, because if they can assassinate him in prison, then they can do that. But it's also possible they just were like, screw it, let's crown Hagon anyway, and then they'll execute the hostage or whatever. Who knows what they'll do? But it's a complete mystery. We have no idea. And I think that's because George intentionally wrote around it, because he wants to include it in a future Dunk and Egg story and doesn't want to delve too far into it until he's decided what he wants to do.
He doesn't want to write himself into a corner.
Exactly. And we know that's how George operates. So, like, even it's a hugely important event in the world of Ice and Fire, kind of yada yada is over. He's like, we all know of the great events that happen. It's like, do we? No, we don't. He's like, you. But that's also a sign that he's saving it, right? So
yes, yeah.
So this line, it's great. It's hard to imagine a better thing for Daemon to have said there. He's trying to recruit people. He wants as many men on his side as possible. So what's the point? So picking a fight with this guy is no good. Yeah, win him over, and it deflates Ball hearing this line. And Bloodraven just saw this happen too. So Bloodraven's sitting right there seeing this easy charisma in action. He's probably like, yeah, don't let that ball get rolling.
Yeah.
We can't have that get out there and have this charisma just shine and recruit people and let people say, ooh, I like him. Just don't let that get going, right? Don't let that snowball become an avalanche, right? Better keep the ball in your court.
You know, by the way, it's also another parallel to
Parallel.
Renly.
Yes.
Renly Lil. Same thing. You wonder how brave was Renly and how naive was Renly.
Yes.
Caitlin even says, like, he's just playing around. He doesn't realize how many people he's about to send to their deaths. You know?
Same. Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, these are just like you don't know the way Daemon was raised. He was raised probably almost certainly in Tyrosh, probably with relative wealth. Now, we know that we suspect the Blackfyre's wealth situation started to collapse at some point, but it may not have yet. After all, he comes over with all this bling. So, like, they're clearly not destitute yet, if that indeed does happen later, which seems not unlikely. So, yeah, he's not... He hasn't even lived in Westeros. He doesn't know the plight of the common people, probably even of Tyrosh, let alone this continent he's never been to until a few months ago or what have you. So, yeah, you're right. It's a very... not privileged is applies, but that's not really the word I'm thinking of. You know, like enclosed,
sheltered.
Like sheltered, exactly, sheltered kind of upbringing, a combination of privileged and sheltered that prevents him from seeing the truth of the world. And it is kind of tragic too, because he does seem in a lot of ways like a decent guy. Maybe a lot of that is just an act. Maybe he does like just his cover, his face. He's good at putting on that face, but I don't know if he had been raised differently, yeah, he might have been a decent person that wasn't just fired up to do this
Half
ridiculous
the characters that have been in charge in one way or another, we'd rather be subbed out with this guy. We'd rather have him than Roose. We'd rather have him than Tywin. We'd rather have him than Joffrey. We'd rather have him than...
Good point, yeah. So the specific line that's really important here, too, he says is, you are your father's son, I hope, when Daemon says that. And that's, by the way, another line that Bloodraven would kind of internally like raise an eyebrow at, like, you know. But that, again... is hits on the huge father-son influence here, which is a big deal. Like, a lot of these characters never met their father. Dunk never met his father. Glendon Ball knows of his father, but didn't meet him, wasn't raised by him. It's just like he's an image. He's an icon, like just a thing to live up to, but without the specific personality details, without the direct impact.
He's more of a concept.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, very good. And like Bloodraven, like, how much was he raised by Aegon the Unworthy? Not very. Not much at all, especially because the dude was dead when he was 9, and he was not much of a father. It kind of contrasts someone like Tywin, who was also a bad father, but in a very different way, like an aggressive, like, I'm in your face, I'm making you feel bad about who you are kind of, whereas Aegon the Unworthy is just like sloppy and cruel and, you know, casual, just doesn't care. He seems like the absentee father type, where Tywin's like I wish he would leave me alone for a minute with his demands and his, like, living up to him. Like, living up to Aegon the Unworthy is like, well, you don't want to live up to that. Yeah. It's like, no one wants to be like that guy. So
sometimes you learn how not to be from your parents or
parent
figures or whatever.
So just like this whole list of, like, almost everyone here has, like, you could say they have father issues. Like, their father was either not present or terrible. Most of them just not present. And with Lord Peake, like I said, we don't know, but he has the same sort of, like, heritage to live up to, which was almost certainly beat into him. And given the recurrence of how members of House Peake being kind of villainous, like, most houses are gray. The Peakes have been sort of like, the Peakes are mostly villainous. I can't think of a single non-villainous Peake. There's some that are just, I don't know. There's neutrals and bads, and there's no good Peaks that we know of yet. So, so Dunk's father figure is Arlen, right? Like, that's when you don't have a father, you still have father figures sometimes, and that's an important dichotomy here. Just because you're not someone's biological father, you can still play the role just as well, right? There's nothing that says that just because you don't share this person's DNA, you can't have a really great relationship. So, really important topic. What do you have to say about it, Sean?
We covered it pretty well.
Okay, cool.
I'm sure those themes will come up more times also.
It is omnipresent. So yeah, you're right. It'll keep coming back, and we'll keep coming back to it when
I suppose I will say, Dunk does often think about Arlen, and it was in this same area here that he thinks, I better have another wine or ale or whatever. Sir Arlen always said, never pass one up when you have a chance,
Yeah.
And he did add in, it might be a year before you get another, but several of his memories of Arlen were touched by alcohol,
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. You're right, because we talked about that, like maybe not so much at the end, maybe he was drinking too much at the end, which,
maybe if he's in pain and dying or has given up on life or something. And
yeah.
I even consider maybe he was an alcoholic, which maybe that's going too far. But even someone who's an alcoholic may just not have access to alcohol except for once a year when they go to some tournament or some wealthy lord or something. Or maybe you're not alcoholic, but when you do get it, it's still a fun time to drink it when it's there. I don't know. But Dunk also does, at least at one point, think, forget now, but he's observing someone else drinking from his skin. And he's like, wine if he's not wise, water if he is. He does understand alcohol can mess you up,
Very true.
And as it messes him up, he's not thinking quite straight through a lot of this.
You're right, yeah. He's already not a great intriguer, but a drunk intriguer, he's particularly hopeless. But makes for a good POV for us just to kind of get the straight dope without any over-analysis from the POV character.
In a way, it almost makes him more reliable.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's not an unreliable narrator. He's just totally just seeing what's happening.
Yeah. In some ways, he's unreliable because he's drunk, or any human is going to be unreliable to some level. But his thoughts aren't skewed by opinions. We're just getting his observations. He's too drunk to form an opinion or to come to a conclusion or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, you can at one point too. You can actually even say like the whole reason all of these people are here are because of the actions of their fathers and because they're all lords and trying to uphold these family aspects or these family powers, whatever word you want to use. Just they're living up to something that's been established for a very long time. It's really hard for us to fathom this in the modern times. We like a family history that goes back thousands of years. Like that's just it doesn't really. I can't. I'm sure you could trace my ancestors back that far if the data was available, but like I wouldn't feel a connection to them because there's no like unbroken line of like we've all lived in the same castle since then. My aunt, the Peaks will have like a sword sitting in somewhere in their castle that like this sword was wielded like 1,000 years ago by someone in our family, and it's like, man, I cannot fathom what it's like to touch an artifact that your own ancestor wielded in battle, like right outside the door.
It is part of the reason why America was sort of this new world, this dream, the American dream, is you weren't tied down to just what your family owned before. Like the land of Europe has been lived in so much longer, there's a lot of less new of it, right?
Yeah.
So you were kind of destined to just do what your father did on your father's land. You come to America, there's new options. But it also means in America, like the oldest buildings here are only a few hundred years old. The oldest families here, like new families were made, new names, new stakes or whatever were created relatively new. So the idea, even if you did go back thousands of years, going back to Europe, it doesn't matter as much to your life or your accomplishments. Even your fathers are going to be less meaningful to us in this world, this time, than it was to them.
Yeah, well said.
Another thought I had earlier, by the way, just thinking about the different clues that Dunk or someone might have keyed in on. When Dunk leaves this eventually, he goes back to Egg. It's telling him this is a traitors tournament. They're like, no, it's not. They're not traitors. Maybe a long time ago.
Egg just flat out says it. Yeah.
And even he is still not necessarily thinking this is a traitors tournament. I don't think he realizes how right he is actually.
It just kind of looks. He's like I was talking to the squires, and every single one of them is like Blackfyre because they're not as good as keeping their mouths shut. Probably they don't understand the reasons. They're not in on it, so they don't know what to say and what not to say, and they just kind of have the vibe. And it's kind of easy to just think like, man, everyone here is. It's like, but Dunk wouldn't necessarily know that because he's not as cognizant of who fought for what side.
It's another thing too, though, as you go back and reread it or reread it or wherever you're at. George has really just hammered it in. Like you have to realize by now, right? Not yet. How about now? Do you realize it?
So George uses some perhaps under the radar connection to move one scene to another here. When the conversation shifts away from the marriage details and into the wedding pie bird defecation, Dunk takes a cue from the birds and leaves to go relieve himself. And it's perhaps the most interesting trip to the bathroom he'll ever make. So he goes out there,
He got low expectations, Aziz.
maybe I'm selling him short there. I mean, Dunk maybe has a lot of interesting trips to the bathroom.
How could you ever sell Dunk short?
Ooh! Well point. So he pulls down his trousers, does his business, but he also, in addition to emptying his bladder, he also drops some eaves. Quite a few eaves. He's dropping eaves all over the place. And he hears right away something that he doesn't understand, but is pretty easy to understand from even a first-time reader's perspective if they know anything about Blackfyre stuff, which they would have been introduced by now. A key problem for the conspirators being the lack of the sword. Yeah, Blackfyre. So here's the quote.
Old Milkblood expected a boy to have it, and so will all the rest. Glib words and charm cannot make up for that.
I got this. A dragon would. The prince insists the egg will hatch. He dreamed it, just as he once dreamed his brother's dead. A living dragon will win us all the swords that we would want.
A dragon is one thing, a dream's another. I promise you, Bloodraven is not off dreaming. We need a warrior, not a dreamer. Is the boy his father's son?
Again, is the boy his father's son? Just that same line, like really close together. In fact, that's one of the reasons Dunk even thinks that. He's like, are they talking about Fireball's son? Are they talking? It's like he's so drunk, he just is like no, they definitely don't give a crap about him. Although they will later because he's so stubborn. But at this point, he's still just that silly kid in there, that angry
because
boy.
He's so right.
Yeah. But now, okay, so. This is one of the reasons we mock this plan is not just bad, but wishful. Because banking on this dream to be accurate, boy, that is just putting all your, eggs in one basket, haha. But if he's right, though, you can see that, if the egg hatched, if a real dragon did hatch here, he's right. That would be a huge deal. People would be like, okay, this is a legitimate Targaryen, or a legitimate, this is the real thing. That's more than the sword. That proves a lot more, doesn't it? If the first dragon hatched in 60-some years, that would be holy crap.
That might even be enough to make Bloodraven, or even is Maekar king? No,
Maekar will be king in about 9 years. It's Aerys.
Aerys is the king right now.
Yeah.
I wonder how would Aerys respond to that?
Because Aerys is the one that expects the dragons to hatch. He's the one that rediscovered the prophecy.
Would he realize it and step down? Okay, fine. I guess you're the one. Or would there have just been another rebellion? More people might have been won to the Blackfyre side of that rebellion if you had a real dragon. You might have won. I guess they might have had to wait for the dragon to grow up is another factor.
It's a problem.
Maybe they try to act quick.
Kill it,
get
maybe.
The dragon
if he kills it.
Or,
that would be something.
Dragon Slayer.
Wow, yeah, that's a different kind of kinslaying. Jesus, part dragon himself, right? So we've seen enough prophetic dreams throughout A Song of Ice and Fire to only know that to be very wary of them. I mean, it's also just true in other fantasy shows or books or whatever. Prophecy pretty much never is completely accurate. And there's times where it is pretty close to accurate, though, that there isn't a whole lot of we were wrong. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward, but not in The Song of Ice and Fire. Very, very well. That table's been well set ahead of time. They don't know better. They haven't read the books. These conspirators, they don't know crap about prophecy. This is all, they're new to this, I think. When have they delved with magic before? It seems like this is not their normal business. They're knights and lords and masters of the battlefield and taxation and cruelty, that kind of stuff. They're not, this is totally outside of their sphere of understanding, I think. It's kind of a recurring thing when someone says, is this a problem? And someone says, let me worry about that. That pretty much means yes.
Yeah.
Pretty much means yes, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem I don't want to admit to. It's a problem I hope to be able to handle, but it's a problem.
This is no exception to that. So to be fair, we don't actually know Daemon Blackfyre's personality super well. It would be fair to say this is not the action that we would think from him, this. We talked about this before, being up late drinking and all that. But the charisma, though, the bringing people to his side, that stuff, maybe that might be. They may be leaning on that too much. They might be seeing that and being like, yeah, see, he's got that going for him. But we've no idea. Yeah, the rest, though, I don't know.
Another observation I made. Maybe I'm skipping ahead, but especially that interaction on the roof when is it Peak that comes up on the roof
Yes.
and Duncan Fiddler talk?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that near the end of the episode too.
It almost seems like he's a prisoner. Like,
Yeah.
it's
He's like, no, you come with me. You got to come with us and do this.
He
Yeah,
comes up with guards. It's time to go to your room. He's again
a puppet. Yeah, kind of a puppet.
A puppet
Mhm.
at least, if not a prisoner. Yeah.
But they can't have him be too much of a puppet, or then he's not like if he's his father's son, then how much of a puppet can he be? Yeah, it's like you can see like how much of the wishful thinking comes in here because it's like, oh, this works because of this factor, despite these other mitigating factors. And it's like, yeah, and this works because of this, and it very looking at it with blinders on, like not like looking at the positive side without seeing all these huge negatives just coming all over the place.
And so, they're risking their necks for this. Some of them maybe are more realistic or concerned or about the process than others.
Yeah.
And so they want to keep him in check. And even Robert gets drunk and people have to steer him around or whoever. It's not that uncommon,
Yeah.
But it is, I think, worth noting, at least, in a pretty private, revealing conversation when the plot is kind of being revealed more definitively to Dunk.
Yeah.
A little later on, but he says, then the throne, and Dunk interrupts, says, will be yours. He says, will be Daemon's.
Yeah.
It's not going to be mine. But if I can control him, and but he does clarify at a point that doesn't necessarily need it, right?
Yeah.
So it is interesting that he does have some sense of honor or etiquette or something about this. But
yeah.
Anyway, I'm skipping around a little too much.
That's fine. That's fine. It's good. It's funny too that Tom Hiddle says, "I promise you, Blood Raven is not off dreaming." Yeah, he's right there in the next room, drinking your wine.
More correct, yeah.
Yeah. And it's also kind of ironic too because he will be off dreaming much later. Like that's the thing they say when he's in the trees. That's the phrase. It's like in a pale lord sat dreaming. It's like this very evocative phrase when Bran first encounters him in his tree seat there, and it's dreaming is the phrase used repeatedly. And then Bran, of course, joins this cadre of dreamers, these ancient dreamers. And so, well played, George. Good said. Sneaky. It's kind of like they can't find a happy medium here. I'm wearing my The Gang Goes to Ice and Fire Con shirt here, so it's appropriate to bring up like a It's Always Sunny joke where they're like, you go from, it's like, well, can we try to be sneaky with this phrase and no one gets it? It's like, okay, cocaine. I'm trying to sell you cocaine. Like
just go over the top.
There's a happy medium in there somewhere. You didn't have to go straight from the most obscure, unidentifiable clue to straight cocaine. Like just somewhere in the middle. Find a happy medium. Why believe these dreams are worthless? Why believe these dreams are everything? Like there's somewhere. You know, it's like
these dreams could just be powder.
Yeah, there might be something to it, but maybe just consider other interpretations. Like it's not, like just think about it. So, and it's like if Tom Hiddle were in charge of this, like he's the one that seems more rational about it. Like if he were in charge, this rebellion might be more serious. It might be something to take more seriously. But Black Tom Hiddle is, even though he's sort of presented like an equal in this conversation, he's obviously not. He's a Castellan. Whereas Gorman Peak is a great lord. The Peaks are a really powerful house, so less powerful than they were, but even less so after this. But
potentially would have been more so after this.
Yes,
right?
if they had succeeded, they would have been like
have moved up to, I don't know, maybe not Lannister level, but
close though. Yeah, like that level. I think you're not exaggerating by saying that. So a good thing for the other side that Peak was in charge. It's like c'est la vie, or should I say c'est la Peak. Now, the sword too, but the sword is really important. So that's why the lack of Bittersteel is really important as well, because Bittersteel was such a huge part of keeping this whole thing alive, while keeping the whole Blackfyre cause going overseas for the past 17-ish years. Like that's how long it's been since the first rebellion, right? Or 17, 15, something like that. It's the dates are close to that. We'll call it close to that anyway.
As long as the Afghanistan war.
Yeah, right.
That going.
It's wild, right? And this isn't even a war. This is just, it's out there. It could happen. You get these claimants. They're over there. Like, what are they doing? Are they going to come with an army? Do they even have an army? At this point, they don't. The Golden Company gets formed like pretty much right after this. It might be Bittersteel's reaction to all this. Might be like, gonna have to get to some more. Gonna have to take this even more seriously. Like, because if these guys were so unserious, I'm going to have to get even more serious. So it is really important, though. Like that, he says we need the sword. And it's not just because it's an important symbol of legitimacy. It's their symbol of legitimacy. So much of what the Blackfyre cause, people who took Daemon's side were because the king gave him the sword. Like, the king gave him the sword. The king gave Daemon Blackfyre the sword that proved he was worthy. It's the Targaryen sword. It was very symbolic. It was like he intended for him to be king. That's what Eustace says, right? That's his line. He's like, this proves it, you know? So not having that sword is a huge, like, whiff, right? Like, oh, it's hard to, man, fail. And it's so he can still prove who he is, like with his purple eyes and his all this other stuff. His name is Daemon, but like without that sword,
even if people completely believe who he is, they still don't like. Everyone completely believed who the rightful king,
Aerys
was, you know.
There's no doubt here,
But they still, well, he's got the sword. Like, we know who one of the other is, but some people are still choosing the sword over the lineage, you know.
Yeah, because it's what they got behind in the first place. It's like, well, they'll stay behind this, and so that's why it's so wishful. Because this guy, Nina calls Peake a gambler, which I think that's a good phrase here. He's gambling on all these factors working. He's like,
it might be a good gamble, to be fair.
It might be in some of the parts of it. Like some of the gambles are bad here, but some of them are accurate, I think, at least in some way. Like, yeah, if the ball gets rolling, if they win, if they get going, he's right. Other lords will join them. That tends to be how it goes. But he might be wrong about just how quickly it will happen. He might be too optimistic about which ones will join. Because he's like, yeah, the Lothtons will come. They'll join our sides. At the end, the Lothtons are behind Bloodraven, showing up to shut them down. Like, would they? Are you sure they would have taken your side if they were so quick to come against you here? Like, maybe. Like, they might have been, but it's sketchy for sure. So I could say here, you know the old phrase, loose links sink ships?
Loose lips.
What did I say?
You loose links.
Loose, did I? Ah, that's hilarious. Okay. Loose lips sink ships.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, no, apparently not. And going back to our friend Aryo Hota, who we cited during the toasting scene, he said conspiracies that require secrecy. Conspiracies that don't require a lot of secrecy are another thing, but conspiracies that require secrecy and a lot of people involved.
Someone always tells.
That's right. Someone always tells. That's right.
I think about that a lot too, about conspiracy theories in a real world. Like, there's no way this many people, like, even if they were all that competent, you know, to actually organize and make some conspiratorial plan, like, there's no way they could keep it secret. Like, I mean, this doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it's not. Or Hotep said, I have this idea in my mind. Benjamin Franklin said, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead.
Yep.
You just accidentally say things that even indicate, if you don't exactly straight up tell the secret, like, you don't realize someone's listening, or that you're implying something that's there. And when dozens of people have to be involved, you know, even if they're all careful, there's just no way to keep it a secret.
And it's worse when you have, so it's hard to keep a secret, but now you have Bloodraven infiltrating your organization with spies and literal magic. Now, try maintaining secrecy with that in place on top of the natural difficulties of keeping secrets. I mean, these guys are barely trying, though, in some cases. He's just walking around, like, talking conspiracy out in the open. Like, can't you hear this guy peeing? Like, he's got to be loud. He's a big man.
He cut it short.
So not only do we have John the Fiddler just unable to contain himself in more ways than one, really. This dude's just like bursting at the seams. He's the nudge, wink, wink guy from Monty Python. Eric Idle's character is like nudge, nudge. It's like not subtle innuendo, like the least subtle possible. You know, he's like referring to his dead brothers as a dead giveaway to anyone who's paying attention. Like, and he was not paying attention. It's like, that comment means very little, but yeah. So some people might kind of from a distance not like this sort of plot device where someone just accidentally overhears a secret plot. And I get that. Like, that is a little weak. But it's not the thing that George does here, though, is it's not crucial. This is not the undermining of the plot. Dunk overhearing this doesn't affect hardly anything. And as we've already said many times, this thing was doomed well before this without them. This is purely a device to show the reader what's happening because of the POV style. You can't get in the plotter's heads. The only thing that can happen here is someone telling him or overhearing. There's no Gorman Peake's head to get into. You know?
I think it's very well done by Martin. You know, we've touched on it a bunch of times, but giving us a bunch of information that Dunk is witness to, even if he doesn't exactly notice it or piece it together, and getting him drunk makes it more believable or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's also a good I appreciate this technique of presentation. Okay, here's something that bothers me a lot with not just like eavesdropping, but a lot of plot devices that are basically chance and coincidence.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
resolving a plot. I think it's fine for chance and coincidence to set up a plot.
Okay,
Right, like
yeah,
I
like
don't know, twin
stumbling
separated
on
at
this-
birth, or even
yeah.
some fantastic thing like
Hmm.
the Force or whatever it is. You can set up a world or a plot with something fantastic or coincidental, but you can't resolve it that way. You
Mhm.
can't have all these characters' struggles and skills
Yeah.
and training and interactions, and then in the end they win because the good guys can't hit with their Uzis and the bad guys one shot, one kill with the pistols.
Yeah.
Right? It can't just be luck that resolves it.
Yeah.
It has to be the skills and decisions of the characters leading along the way. So Dunk is lucky to catch this conversation, but that's not what gets him through it in the end. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah, it's not like the second Blackfyre. It's like, I would have succeeded if not for this one overhearing trip at the bathroom. You know,
Yeah.
like this one particular thing. Yeah, so it's not moving the plot forward. It's a way to illuminate the plot. So I think that's an important distinction to make. Like we said, Dunk doesn't even understand what he hears. He's got
Can I
no
just
idea.
say,
Yeah.
you were talking about, I would have done it if not for those pesky kids.
Yeah,
you know?
Scooby-Doo,
And
yeah.
I'm picturing they pull off the glamour. It was Blood Raven all along. It was old man Blood Raven.
That's really good, yeah. So it's also really fun to compare this scene to the Varys Illyrio scene with Arya down in the dungeon. It's got so much in common with it. First of all, it's the almost exact same narrative device in that Arya doesn't understand what's happening. It doesn't change the plot. It doesn't undermine their plot because she's not even able to explain it to Ned. She's like, there was a wizard and the hat, and like they were talking about killing the hand, and Ned's like, ha, silly girl. He just laughs it off. It doesn't change anything. It's purely to show the reader this plot. Like, it's to introduce us to the Varys Illyrio plot. It's something you keep coming back to after 5 books because it's so important, and George just keeps giving us more to explain what that moment was. But it's also, what's also so cool about it is the same situation where there's no Gorman Peak POV, there's no Illyrio POV, there's no Varys POV, so we have to get this. So overhearing is a good way to do it, but George doesn't cheapen it by making it crucial. And what else is so cool about it is they're discussing the same thing, a Blackfyre restoration.
Yeah.
He hadn't invented the name Blackfyre yet when he wrote Game of Thrones, but he was still setting up a secret sort of cadet branch restoration that he hadn't fully fleshed out. But where is Arya standing? Complete darkness in a dragon skull with the only light being
a black skull.
yes, they are. Yeah, because the dragon bones are black, and it's the only light is the fire of a torch. So it's really awesome. It's the same dynasty, same eavesdropping, for the same benefit of the reader, for the same family, same throne. It's so cool.
You should have had RP down there. That would have really tied it all together.
Well point. That's really good. So during the feast too, there's another interesting clue about the sign of, and this relates to Bittersteel. They talk about how the Brood of Bracken's not there. And they're like, he's not going to show up for this. It's the tournament of blah, blah, blah. And they're like, does that really make sense? It's a dragon egg at risk here. You can win a dragon egg. What do you mean you're not showing up for this dinky tournament? That's a big prize.
Not a dinky tournament, yeah.
And it's he lives just down the road. It's not even a far trip for him. He's literally one of the closest houses, the Brackens.
Why didn't he show up? Do you think he wasn't invited? Do you think he didn't know about it?
He's Bittersteel's relative. So if Bittersteel's not there, it's a sign. He's like, well, if Bittersteel's not backing this, I'm not dragging the family into this either. They may have communicated about it.
Isn't it also possible that they thought it would be too obvious if he went, that it would draw more eyes?
You're right. That's true. That too as well. But the lack of him there also is kind of well, why is he not here? Either way.
Yeah, it's kind of notable either way. You are correct.
Yeah, and it is just another indication that they don't really have all their ducks in a row.
Yeah, they don't have their dunks in a row either. So yeah, it's odd. It's a notable omission. His presence not being there is it doesn't add up. The explanation given is so it's pretty neat. Considering that, it's another little world building drop. Now, there's another parallel here that's interesting that also relates to both eavesdropping stories. The eavesdropping stories combine an element of, will this big, powerful guy we need on our side cross the narrow sea to help us? Drogo for Varys and Illyrio, Bittersteel for here. Now, in both cases, they will cross, sort of, eventually. Like, Drogo's obviously dead, but the Dothraki are probably going to cross with Dany instead, right? Like, that seems pretty likely. In much greater numbers, probably, than even Varys and Illyrio predicted. Because they were going to... Their thing was to try to murder his son, or murder Daenerys, and that encourage him to take revenge on the Seven Kingdoms. That was their plan. Of course, it didn't work out that well. They're not trying to get... There's no, like, manipulating Bittersteel to get him to cross. They're just trying to say, hey, look, we're doing the rebellion. This is your cause. Come on. They're trying to lure him over to help, and it's a little more direct. In this case, they want to directly ally with him, whereas Varys and Illyrio more like using the Dothraki. Mm-hmm. He wanted to have them invade and then have their guy save the realm from that and be like the heroic savior. So in this case, it's kind of like you're heroically saving the realm from the evil Targaryen rule, the Aerys and Bloodraven, like the bad, with their kinslaying and their all that sorceress nonsense and all that. So it's similar, like the type of like attitude they're trying to engender in the populace and the plotting and all that. That's so cool. These parallels are really big, but sneaky. Like, it's simultaneously robust.
They're grand, but not obvious. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
We have, of course, the Dothraki and their horses and Bittersteel.
Hey, the horse sigil. Yeah, Bittersteel sigil is a flying horse, a dragon, a horse breathing fire. The Bracken sigil is a regular horse.
Yeah, regular horse. So yes,
Bittersteel dragonized it.
We're horse people.
Yeah, the horse people. So that's really good. Okay, so let's jump to our mid-roll here. We're about a little over an hour in, and let's take a few comments and questions, and then we'll get back to it. Dornish Dame says, wonder a bit if Bittersteel almost set Daemon up to fail so they could move on to Haegon, and if Daemon favored music and lacked marks of talent, Bittersteel may have seen him as more akin to Daeron II than his father. Yeah, it's possible. Austin Flowers says, but why risk the embarrassment of that failure? Yeah, well, possibly because he didn't have a choice. Like, what's he going to do? Murder his own? Because Bittersteel married one of Daemon's daughters. So he's now like, and he's already his half brother. So this is his nephew. So it's like setting him up to fail and die is possible because he's not directly responsible. But I don't know how Bittersteel feels about kinslaying. He would kill Bloodraven if he could. That's his half brother. Yeah. So like that much he would do, and Bloodraven ditto. But so maybe he's not as concerned about kinslaying, but he has to be a little concerned about how the realm views such things. So, but I don't know. This is interesting
to think about.
It's a good question.
Because in some ways too, they might be testing the waters. How quickly does Bloodraven catch on? How prepared? How many allies do we have? But also, well, you just lost all those allies. Whatever your next attempt is, you have that many fewer people to help you out. So
yeah, good point. Another really good take from Alice in Westeros here. Now, before I get into it, a lot of you all wrote in or sent us messages about the fiddle concept. We were like, what does it mean? Why is he John the Fiddler? Was it purely to set up the fiddler on the roof joke? Is that it? Maybe, but probably not. There's probably more to it. George likes multiple definitions. And a lot of you wrote in with ideas. I think this is one of the most comprehensive takes by Alice in Westeros here. So I'm going to read it. She says, one of the definitions for fiddle is to meddle or tamper, which is a pretty good fit for the fake hedge knight. But the British definition of fiddle includes the word swindle. Like, that's more used there for that. And swindle, that is very more like what's happening here. They're trying to manipulate events, swindling the tournament, setting up a lot of different people to participate. Some people may not even realize they're being drawn into a Blackfyre rebellion here.
Yeah,
and I'm
like that. I last week was talking about how the definition of fiddle was to meddle and tamper with something, but I did not realize the swindle part of that.
That
so
is very
makes it even clearer to me.
It's a really good take. Yes, thank you for that.
I do like words
Alice.
In general and the subtleties and the meanings and the crossovers of synonyms, because I also like the idea of the fiddle meaning to manipulate, and manipulate a lot of times has this sort of negative connotation of manipulating another person.
Yeah.
But also you can like manipulate controls or manipulate a tool, or even manipulating people can be positive, getting them to put more effort into something or realize their potential, and all those things all fit so perfectly. I feel silly for not having thought of it. in the
Whereas
first
I
place,
was
you know.
thinking, fiddling, like, you kind of just do something to
Yeah.
no effect. You're like fiddling with your hair.
Fiddling around
or-
with a pencil because you're bored, or
Yeah, but you're not
you're-
doing anything.
It's a waste.
anxious energy or something. But
Yeah, the whole thing
Failed
was
swindling.
failed swindling. Yeah. So, and then another suggestion was people bring up Nero, the fiddling, fiddling on the roof while Rome burned. It was like a Blackfyre burning. I don't know. That might kind of work, especially because he does go on the roof and he's fiddling up there, and he's particularly open with his dreams and his like flirtatiousness when he's up there. He's at his most like off point there. He's like, we've incited a few of his lines that were humorous. We'll get to that later, but it's like the overwhelming flirting there is just
humorous.
so funny.
I thought that everything was just straight normal.
Well, we're going to show you some examples. we're going to teach you. So we'll get into this next part here, the betrothal story. We'll start off with a take from Guinevere Greenstones. Oh, you have another take?
You brought up your shirt. I wanted to bring up my shirt.
Oh, yeah, do
By
it.
the way, I don't know how well can be sent in a screen around my microphone, but you might think that this is the tree where Dunk buried Arlen. But you're wrong. It's where Iroh buried Laytoon, I think his name was. It's from Avatar,
Oh, okay.
which I just realized has a lot of parallels to Dunk and Egg.
You did say there were a few. Here, hit us with some parallels.
Like Egg, the main character, 10-year-old bald boy. Aang, the main character, 10-year-old bald boy.
Oh, I don't know Avatar very well, so this is news to me. Yeah.
And Aang is also, I don't want to get too deep into it, but basically he's supposed to be in this sort of position of power. But he just wants to be a little kid. A little similar to Aang.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it. I mean, it's its own story in its own for sure. I wouldn't say it's only parallels to History of Westeros or to Dunk and Egg, but there's a lot for sure.
Right on.
So
Cool. Super chat from Matthew Witham. Thank you for the support, Matthew. Much appreciated. Yeah, and the starting off with Guinevere Greenstones' take here on the wedding pie symbology and the purpose of marriage. Now, Nina had some takes on this as well. It's really interesting to show just like the denigration put here, just the casual misogyny that's thrown around, which is not unexpected for this setting at all, of course. But Maynard says, what's the point of marriage? Well, it's, her C word, or what would be the point? And and there's lines like, churn the butter well, my sweet. It's like, ugh, like that's from her father. Like her father says that. It's like, oh, come on. Like, God, that's like right before the bedding. Like, ugh. But like you have, the bedding itself is of course even worse, but this is what she says. It's amazing that George can write a male POV like Dunk with zero experience of women, yet still demonstrate the difference between his ignorance and the ingrained misogyny in society. Because Dunk doesn't get into this. He's not like, yeah, churn the butter well. This doesn't resonate with him. He doesn't explicitly reject it, but he's not down with it either. He's not like, yeah, misogyny. I mean, he wouldn't necessarily recognize it as that because he's living in it. But it's nice that he, kind of in the way that he thinks of Egg, is like, I need to make sure he has food. He's like, this isn't for me. Like, I'm not going to insult women. I'm not going to mock people. Like, it provides that context, that difference.
it is another, and again, this is probably a very broad, debatable topic, but the idea of how much we're affected by our, what's the word, our nurture, our surroundings.
Nature, nurture, yeah, sure.
Right,
environment,
like,
yeah.
That everyone in every society isn't always exposed to the exact same things. Things are actually a little more homogenized these days because of TV and the internet and everything. But the wealthy nobles are going to go through a different set of life circumstances and expectations of women and men. Like, you can imagine people living on a farm might have a little bit more recognition of the work that a woman does,
Yeah.
right? Than the nobles, where they're just the mothers of the kids and don't say anything, stay out of our way, where you count on them to churn the butter and raise the kids and sometimes plow the field and all the other work that needs to be done to make regular life happen when you're not wealthy, to pay other or force other people to do it.
Yeah. So the betrothal story, let's talk about that. This is another clue that Bloodraven is not who he seems, or Maynard Plumm is Bloodraven, because of, like, how does he know all these? Like, how does he know all these secrets about the origin of this wedding, or this marriage? Which, yeah, he could have heard rumors. There's some people talking about it. It's not completely out of the question, but it's adds to the pastiche of ideas here. So it may not look like it. This is another example of like father, like son to be found here with the phrase. When Dunk comes back inside from emptying his bladder, Outside, there's more bladder emptying going on inside. Quote.
His melancholy ponderings were rudely interrupted when a troop of painted dwarves came bursting from the belly of a wheeled wooden pig to chase Lord Butterwell's fool about the tables. Whew, that's a lot of sentence.
That is.
It's not a ton. Walloping him with inflated pig's bladders that made rude noises every time a blow was struck. It was the funniest thing Dunk had seen in years, and he laughed with all the rest. Lord Frey's son was taken by their antics that he joined in, pummeling the wedding guests with a bladder he borrowed from a dwarf. The child had the most irritating laugh Dunk had ever heard, a high, shrill hiccup of a laugh that made him want to take the boy over a knee and throw him down a well. If he hits me with that bladder, I may do it.
So this is the one time we see Dunk kind of like, yeah, he's like, we were just talking about how good natured Dunk is on the inside, but here he is thinking about throwing a child in a well because of how awfully annoying he is. And we get it because we know that laugh. It's the Walder Frey.
He did have a good intuition about the nature of this child.
Yes, that's right. Yes, maybe he should be throwing it. It's going to be funny, by the way. Like, it made me think, like, is that what's going to happen? Is that how Lord Walder's going to die eventually? Is someone going to throw him in a well?
Yeah.
Is that how he's going to die in the main series?
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, nudge, nudge,
eh?
wink, wink.
Down
Well.
the well, eh?
So, but more than that, it's one of the most intriguing moments in the story because not only because of the story itself, that's perhaps not even half of it. What fascinates me about is who the speaker and the listener are. The person telling the story is Bloodraven. He says, there's the lad who made this marriage when young Walder Frey goes running by. And who says, how so? John the Fiddler. So Bloodraven's telling John the Fiddler how this wedding happened. It's so meta. It's like, whoa, like I am about to take you down. But I'm going to tell you part of what happened. I'm going to tell you the origin of this whole situation that is part of what's going to take you down. It's like, wow. So Bloodraven explains the daughter was caught naked with a kitchen scullion who she'd been having an affair with repeatedly. Daemon didn't know this. He didn't know this. This is kind of an undermining of the thing. Is like, really? That's the reason? He doesn't seem to care. We don't get his reaction to it because Dunk like passes out.
Yeah.
But but even
he also seems to be kind of on top of the world. This is the night before he's crowned.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's drunk, and he might hook up with Dunk tonight. You know, like he's not worried about what made this wedding. You know, but maybe he should be. Maybe he should have been told up front. Would he have still gone along with this? You know,
that's really funny. Yeah. So it's it's super, like I said, super meta. You got like the main sort of operator, the big brains behind the operation, just directly talking to the mark, the guy that he's after, so it's really neat. And Dunk, even despite his drunkenness, his lack of understanding the intrigue, even this part stands out to him, the marriage, the oddness of this match. And here's another quote.
Why would he wed a girl who's been soiled by a kitchen scullion and give away his dragon's egg to mark the match? The Freys of the Crossing were no nobler than the Butterwells. They owned a bridge instead of cows. That was the only difference. Lords, who can ever understand that?
So wealth is often a reason why a so-called lesser house marries into a higher house. Like they pay a massive dowry. In the case of Lionel Corbray, he married a non-noble, or had his daughter marry a non-noble. Oh no, he married a non-noble girl, and Littlefinger describes the dowry as staggering. So it's like, yeah, if you're not even a noble family, you really got to pay to join the club. It's like massive country club dues or something like that, something to the effect. It's like you pay a big bribe to a noble family and they'll bring you and they'll make you a noble also. That's kind of how it works. And it's the same thing works for lesser to greater nobles. But that's why Bloodraven points out that these are equal houses. Like these are relatively equal houses. So why is the so-called soiled daughter being married to the guy who's given away the dragons? Like he shouldn't have to give away anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's odd. It even by the standards of marriages between nobles, this is backwards. Right? It's the phrase should be the ones paying up. Because this is a quote soiled daughter, which I don't like that phrase, but that's the term they're using. It's the germane term here. Nina makes a great comparison, calling up the name of Amare Frey, aka Gatehouse Amy, who was a Frey married off because she had affairs with, stable boys or whatever. And it was the same thing. She married down, right? They had to find someone to take her, right?
Married down from the Freys?
Yeah, right? So it's like...
yeah, she married a hedge knight.
Yeah. So it's... right? The scandal. But like you see, so it's like it goes to show, like, yeah, this is out of the ordinary. So it's yet another clue. So the dragon is not simple extravagance. It's like, okay, this is unusual, it's unnecessary, and wealthy people aren't trying to get it. Like, where they're not showing up to try and win it. And Dunk is just like, who can understand? Well, several people can, especially Bloodraven sitting right there. Another example from Nina here, good one. The example of Jon Arryn and Lysa Tully, right? Comparing the Butterwell Frey marriage to that. She says the Baratheon Arryn Stark rebel faction needed the quote swords and spears of House Tully during Robert's rebellion. Jon Arryn had lost his nephew-in-law and heir Dennis Arryn at Stony Sept, and his nephew Elbert had been killed by Aerys, executed along with Brandon's companions in the infamous moment there when he burned Rickard and all that. Jon needed a new wife if House Arryn was going to keep going. So this was just exactly what's happening here. Butterwell lost all his sons, so he's got to make new sons. But the real goal there was to get House Tully's army on their side. That was another point. Like for Jon Arryn, he wants to continue his house, but for the Tullys, they don't necessarily care about the Arryns continuing. I'm sure that's a benefit to them, but for them, they want to be on the winning side. They need to be really bought in. They're not going to casually take the side of a rebel faction, especially because the Tullys have a history of supporting the Targaryens, et cetera, et cetera. Makes a lot of sense here. But if you compare the arrangement, that's what's going on. The Freys are being given extra here because their military strength is what is really being given. That's the real prize here. No one's speaking about it openly, but that's what it is. It's their army. And we know from A Song of Ice and Fire, the Freys do have a substantial army.
Their geographical location, too.
Yes, they're close by. Like, these are all, like, most of these...
Well, not just close by, but they can control that pass.
Oh,
that
yeah, you're right.
river,
Yes, good point. The crossing is really important. Like, it would keep the Northerners out or let them in if they were on their side. So I wonder about this. Is he trying to undermine Daemon's confidence with these comments? Like, just showing him what's really happening? Like, showing him how the weakness of the conspirators that are backing him? It doesn't seem to have an effect, like we said, because this guy's just, like, flying high on confidence and wine.
That can make anything possible.
But I think it does kind of fit with his strategy of just like, he's not trying to kill anyone, he's just trying to undermine this, trying to cause this whole thing to collapse in on itself. Take away morale, take away enthusiasm, take the steam out of it.
Which I didn't think of till just now, but it behooves him to do that. It could be, what's the word? It might encourage others to do it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, good point.
If he can keep this, if he can eliminate this on the DL, that would be better for him. Yeah.
Because here's a question we didn't attempt last time that I would like to discuss briefly, which is, we talked about Quentin Ball's death by arrow, and this is one of the interesting things about this event, is that it's not rare, but it's a little unusual that Nina and I have a separate take on this. She thinks it was, as said, basically some guy killed Quentin Ball on the eve of battle. Doesn't have to be an assassination. I agree with that possibility, but I do leave room for it being an assassination by Bloodraven. He knows the importance of certain men, certain leaders, a valuable frontline general dying on the eve of an important battle. Got to consider the possibility, like, at least it's hard to not consider that was an accident. But beyond the idea, even if Bloodraven is responsible or not, just beyond that idea, what I want to suggest and bring up, which is relevant to A Song of Ice and Fire, is just the notion that sorcery can steer an arrow, right? Because he's accused of that on the Redgrass Field, of killing Aegon and Aemon and Daemon that way, right? With his steering, his sorcerer, fired as much by sorcery as by his bow, right? The reason that's relevant to me, possibly for Song of Ice and Fire, is if you've got Bran, you got arrows, you got bolts, you got dragons. Steering, and a dragon has to hit it right in the eye to kill it. Yeah, someone, helping a shot along. Like, that's a really hard shot to make. Shooting a dragon in the eye with an arrow. But if you got sorcery helping you, I'm just saying, could be a setup for that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a complete nothing. But it could be like undead dragon, Euron's dragon, something like that. You got to hit it right in the eyeball. I don't know. What do you think?
I I tend to like the idea of it just being a random
Yeah.
soldier had killed him. I think it's maybe more realistic or fitting.
Absolutely.
It is
Yeah.
just the way the world works sometimes. It isn't only great people that kill other great people. But also, it is possible, if not likely, even if it wasn't Bloodraven himself that shot him with an arrow,
Yeah.
Bloodraven might have put a bounty on, hey, whoever kills this guy, 100 gold dragons
Maybe.
or whatever,
Yeah,
you know.
maybe. Because it's such a good shot, too. Like, you shoot him from really far away, hit him in the throat while he's drinking from a stream. Like, it's an incredible shot. Not that a peasant can't do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely they can. Like, these guys are people, peasants have to live by their archery skills. Like, if you miss, you don't eat.
You know,
You know?
here's a couple more thoughts. It does seem like even if it was just some random archer, that after having done that, they might have been applauded, knighted, praised, rewarded in some way.
I'm saying, yeah.
But
there's-
you know, the first rule of assassination is kill the assassin. You know, if
Mm.
Bloodraven did put a bounty out, whoever did do it, they might have been killed after for doing it, or at least ordered to keep it secret so it wasn't known that Bloodraven did. I could see all kinds of reasons why it might have been covered up, and the fact that we don't know who it was, even if it was just some random archer.
Yeah.
It's like after the fact, we might have found out who it was. You think that person would have killed him and not gone and told their captain or their lord or whoever, hey, look who I killed.
Yeah, that's true. And it's also kind of a thing, like the phrase, like even if like random peasants go about killing, you know, nobles and kings, and like then that's a thing, like a cultural thing. Like you're not supposed to do that. Your peasants aren't supposed to kill great lords. That's just propaganda, you know. But it is
Great
it's
lords aren't
effective.
supposed to join rebellions.
Yeah, that too, right? Yeah. So now Fireball, just as a little more background on him, he's inspired by Henry Hotspur Percy, who was an English knight, like a really important figure in the time of Henry IV. We cover him a little more in Blackfyre, in the Blackfyre series, but he's also depicted in Shakespeare, and that is a good example of the popular retelling. The, you know, Shakespeare's version isn't trying to be history. That's the version that a lot of people like rely on, even though it's not accurate. Shakespeare's just, you know, making this guy seem more interesting. But hey, that's normal. Here's another good example of Dunk being unaware of himself. Dunky's like, I wonder if Rohan or Tanzel are thinking of me ever, like, you know, sexually. And we just have like the women staring at him, and the one woman like sticks her chest out at him.
Yeah.
Was like, yeah, they think about you. Yeah, they do.
You know, I had the thought, I wonder if Eustace, or when Eustace dies,
Yeah.
would Rohan seek Dunk out? Would she send an envoy or messenger, someone to track him down with him? Would she have secured her lands well enough that she could afford to marry him?
The timing is awkward because we know she marries Gerald Lannister.
Right, but how quickly?
in
Do we
between?
know
Yeah,
when?
I don't know.
And that might even be a story that Martin tells somewhere in there that, like, and I even thought, you know what'll happen is that her messenger will show up to King's Landing just as he's been dubbed into the King's Guard. Like, hey, Rohan wants you to come back to her.
Oh, man.
Oh.
I gotta look up the date.
Yeah.
It's like up too late. Sorry. So he passes out, dreams of them both at the same time. He may have thought the world was supporting his dreaming efforts because he wakes up to shouts of "Bed them, bed them," and he's like, I was about to do that until you woke me up, damn it. I was having a really nice dream of just that. But no. So no, but of course it's the bedding ceremony. They're not yelling at him. They're not cheerleading his dream, his sex dreams. They're cheerleading the bedding ceremony. So we'll move on to the bedding ceremony. Daemon is another great catch. Another red wedding parallel was when Daemon goes, let the giant carry her, right? The only time, like, the giant, which is funky because in the red wedding, who carries Rosalind? The
Tyrion?
great...
Oh, no, it's the other way. Okay.
The great John. And he's, of course, not only is he also gigantic, possibly even bigger than Dunk, his sigil is a giant. And he says, give this little bride to me, and grabs her, throws her over one shoulder, it says. Here, with Dunk, they're trying to get him to do it. They might say they were egging him on. Yeah. I'll regress because I've made myself perfectly redundant. The bedding is something of a familiar refrain. We've seen a few of these in the stories. Sad to say, this is not pure fiction. There are real-world beddings that are kind of like this. witnesses present for consummation. That's the general thing. That's the point of it. Is they're just trying to make sure that it really happened. Pretty awkward. Previous examples like Sansa, Rosalind Frey, we've talked about a lot here. Catelyn, of course, remembers her own ceremony. Hers wasn't too bad in terms of her own memory. She doesn't have negative memories of it. Not great memories of it, but it doesn't like traumatize her, whereas Rosalind is probably traumatized to some degree. We've got Sansa. And this is, of course, the reminder of Lady Verwell crying. This is kind of coming back to that. Now, this Frey girl doesn't seem to be having too bad of a time, even though it is, pretty bad. She's not like crying or anything, so that's something. But we get a kind of a closer look at what it tends to function as. Because all those other ones had weird stuff, like Tyrion's like, no bedding ceremony. Yeah. Like something like kind of interrupted a lot of those. And of course the Red Wedding that one's not typical. So this is actually the most typical one we've seen. The marriage actually holds, even though like this rebellion collapses. Bloodraven's like, you keep your wife though. Yeah. Like, I wish you happiness with her, no, get away. So
hope it was worth it.
Yeah, it wasn't, but make the most of it if you can. So yeah, so this is a pretty interesting look at that because it's more, like I said, more normal. But also it reminds us of cases like Barristan thinking about Aerys taking quote unquote liberties with Joanna during her bedding when she married Tywin. And that's a big source of friction between Tywin and Aerys for a long time. Well, mostly on Tywin's side, Aerys just doesn't care, probably. He's like, I'll do what I want. But like that's a thing. Like he grabbed her. Apparently, that's like the most like that seems to be like a likely thing. Like he fondled her or something, which is what we see like this dwarf do here. And it kind of reminds us like, this is not obviously not okay, but it probably somewhat not abnormal given everyone's drunk and people are misogynist and grabby. Like, yeah, I'm sure this is,
even if somehow this ritual is standard, there are at least some people who think there should be some limits. There's some line you shouldn't pass.
Yeah.
And maybe some scallion, maybe some naive teen noble son or some kitchen person or but not the lords, not the king. You shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
The whole thing, it's like, it's almost, part of me is like, I can't believe that this type of thing would come about. I can't believe fathers would stand there while this happens to the daughters. But then I think Tywin would definitely let this happen. Roose would let this happen.
Yeah, they're like trying to protect their power. They're like, yep, we all have to suffer for the family.
They don't have any more respect for their daughter than they do for women in general, I guess. They
don't even see it as being disrespectful, I think. That's part of it. Like, I don't even know if they see it that way. Like, they see it like, nope, this is how it has to be.
I just want to shake them.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
So it's kind of, so Nina wonders even like, maybe given that scenario, maybe Aerys was like, I'll carry her, and he's like fondling her. Now it's hard to think about Aerys carrying someone because the picture of Aerys is like this frail old man. But back then,
he would have been younger. Yeah.
He was knighted. He fought in the Nine Penny Kings Rebellion and all that war. So he wasn't always like that. He was, according to others, when he was young, he was promising. Right? Barristan says he was full of promise. Because he hadn't gone off the deep end yet. He had all his faculties, or most of them, at that point. So yeah, so he wasn't weak and frail. He was probably capable of it, but maybe not fully capable, but it wasn't crazy to think, So that's a possibility. Like you could see him jumping at the chance to fondle this woman he's had the hots for forever. He's made many comments about in the past, and that would set up a lot more of the frustration, the anger, the intensity, the desire for revenge that Tywin would be holding on to for a very long time. So here's a description of the bedchamber. You're talking about the armor. We actually get a quote of that here, but also we get the lead into the setup. This is a whole bunch of fancy things about to be forfeited to the crown, basically.
Lord Butterwell's chamber was large and lavish once he found it. Mirrors, carpets covered the floors, 100 scented candles burned in nooks and crannies, and a suit of plate inlaid with gold and gems stood beside the door. It even had its own privy set into a small stone alcove in the outer wall.
The very next line after the quote is the dwarf jumping into bed and fondling the girl. So you have the back-to-back lines where you have privy, dwarves, and then Dunk says, hey, stop that. Grabs him,
Let's go.
If I'm doing that, it's always towards Sean.
Okay. So we have the three things in a row here. We have the privy set into the wall. We have the next line, the dwarf jumping into bed, saying, and then Jung calls him off and says, stop that. And then as he's hauling the dwarf off the bed, it turns him to the side, and he sees the egg for the first time. And we get something precious, not just the egg itself, but one of the best descriptions we've ever gotten of a dragon's egg, so it's worth quoting.
It was much bigger than a hen's egg, though not so big as he'd imagined. Fine red scales covered its surface, shining bright as jewels by the light of lamps and candles. Dunk dropped the dwarf and picked up the egg, just to feel it for a moment. It was heavier than he'd expected. You could smash a man's head with this and never crack the shell. The scales were smooth beneath his fingers, and the deep, rich red seemed to shimmer as he turned the egg in his hands. Blood and flame, he thought, but there were gold flecks in it as well, and whirls of midnight black.
Man, that's cool, right? And we discussed how the egg as a prize sends all sorts of signals, and now it's even weirder given the marriage circumstances, but because it's like, wow, this thing is so amazing. But this isn't just Dunk's awe. The description of it is important for setting up the fake version later. Now, we don't see the fake one, right? It's he's like, I bet it's nothing more than a painted stone, which, given this description, how the heck are you going to fake that? Yeah. like it would be really obvious. It's like, no, that's not a dragon's egg. Come on. I just saw a real one, and this is nothing. There's no shiny this and that. The scales, like, you can't fake that.
Maybe a couple people were like, yeah, it's real, and try to keep it. But Dunk would know. Let me see it.
Yeah.
Because I know. I saw it.
Yeah. And, and if someone else turns up with the real one, like, this egg? Yeah. And that, of course, is very helpful. So he knows he can call Peake's bluff later. When they try to pin it on Glendon Ball, he's like, I don't know about that. But another really thing about this is that it makes him melancholy. The egg makes him melancholy. And that's really interesting for looking ahead, thinking about how the dragon eggs represent death and destruction via Summerhall, and just dragons represent death and destruction anyway.
He thought about smashing someone's head with it.
Yeah,
look at it as a weapon.
Yes, you're right. That's really interesting. Like, he's not like someone like Dunk. He thinks of it like it's a jewel, but he's like, yeah, this is heavy enough to smash a man's head in. Why not heavy enough to, I don't know, lots of other things. Like, why that? Out of all the ways he can imagine that its weight, he thinks of it as a weapon. Yeah, and that is telling. With the color of the egg being blood and flame. Nina agrees. It's like, she calls it proto-foreshadowing for Dunk's eventual death at Summerhall. Like, eggs are going to kill him, too, in a sense. But the combination of egg and eggs and wildfire, I suppose.
But also, even as a dragon, it's a weapon.
Yes. You're right. Yes, you're right. Because
if it does hatch, what do you think's going to happen?
And it's a symbol, too.
A soft blanket that comforts the realm.
Okay, so a little bit of research. Ash, you did some research here?
Yeah, just to answer your thoughts, Sean, because I was curious. Rohan married to Gerald Lannister at some point between 211 and 219. Notably, what we see in the Sword and Sword is 211. So, like, Eustace could have died as early as, like, right after.
Yeah.
But
Eustace could already be
like
dead.
219, probably more towards the middle end, let's say.
Yeah.
And they had their first kids. So that's well before Dunk becomes Kingsguard. Rohan disappears in 230 under mysterious circumstances.
Which
Dunk, Egg ascends to the throne in 233, and then Dunk, the first time he is referred to as a Kingsguard is in 236. Probably he was, made one maybe a year or two before when Egg ascended, but
it may have been during Makar's reign. Makar could have rewarded him.
Yeah,
So,
that's just the first time.
But yeah, we don't know.
Obviously, what this means is that Rohan went to kill Tansel because Dunk couldn't get over her. And she wanted him wholehearted. Yeah, it's the only possible story that Martin has to write about this.
So let's talk about Dunk. Then, he's in the room, the bedding, and all this happens. It sets up the theft. Gorman Peake gets on him for touching the egg. And he's like, oh, my bad. Sorry. Why did I pick that up? It is a little, he's like, yeah, why? I should know better than to just handle the fancy jewels, So he goes upstairs for the roof to get a little air, and John the Fiddler follows him up, and we get...
He can handle John's fancy jewels.
That's true. Now, I'm... jumping ahead to... We're going to discuss this scene in full, but jumping ahead to the end of it, because it's so funny. I love this line so much.
the pair of men-at-arms.
Yeah.
A pair of men-at-arms stepped onto the roof. Lord Gorman Peak was just behind them. Gormy, the fiddler drawled. What are you doing in my bedchamber, my lord?
It's a roof, sir, and you have had too much wine. Lord Gorman made a sharp gesture, and the guards moved forward. Allow us to help you to that bed. You are jousting on the morrow, pray recall. Kirby Pym can prove a dangerous foe.
I had hoped to joust with good Sir Duncan here.
So much innuendo. That's another thing. We've got a running list of all the innuendo. We'll get to that at the end or in the wrap-up.
I'll make you my man.
Yeah, we were talking about doing all the innuendo in the wrap up with Nina. We can all do a little round where we go around and read it together.
That'll be fun. Now, direct clue that Kirby Pym's in on it, because like they're saying that's who you're fighting. It's like, well, this guy's clearly been bribed because clearly all his opponents are setups. So that's really funny. But what are you doing in my bedchamber? This is the roof. So it's the fiddler on the roof joke. It's so good.
Also interesting, it is another, like, he doesn't even know that he's relating to Dunk here, but he is. Dunk slept on the roof, wants to be under the stars.
Good point.
He really is a brother in a sense, you know?
Yeah, you're right. They do have things in common. It's true. Like, Daemon is trying to make too much of that, but they do have things in common. They like the father stuff, the living up, the like trying to be a knight, trying to, deal with all this business, handling royals, just... expectations, D-names. Good one. So they discuss dreams. This is a great scene. This is one of the most important scenes of the whole story, probably, at least as far as like extrapolating things outside of this story, like looking at how dreams work and eggs work and all these other things. It's a very valuable moment there. So here's another quote. I'll start it. A dragon will hatch? A living dragon? What, here?
I dreamed it. This pale white castle, you... a dragon bursting from an egg? I dreamed it all, just as I once dreamed of my brothers lying dead. They were 12 and I was only 7, so they laughed at me and died. I am 2 now, and I trust my dreams. Yeah,
so as we said earlier, he's had time to learn, to see more of his dreams to come true when you're 7. He probably hasn't had a lot of that, but it's a really good time for us to think of Daeron the Drunken, because Daemon here is the Drunken in this scene as well.
It's really too bad Daeron and Daemon couldn't grow up together.
Yeah, right.
They could have dreamers. They could have really commiserated over it. And, yeah,
might have been nice to have someone to talk to about that. It might have not been so depressing, and yeah, he might not have.
And maybe actually pieced some truth of it together too.
You're right. Yeah, they could have worked together and like talked to Aerys, who's the one predicting these things. Yeah, if they had really put some science behind this, some logic, some rationality, like some organization behind it all, maybe it would have gone differently. But but yeah, one of the hugely notable examples here is we were just talking about it. He dreams of Dunk in the Kingsguard. So I was like, yep. But again, it's an example of clearly his timing is off. But I wonder, was Daemon alive in captivity when Dunk gets knighted or gets put in the Kingsguard? He's like, there it is. Like, damn it. It's like another thing just for him to be depressed about while sitting in prison. Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting.
Hope he was.
Yeah,
I wonder, especially if that's the case, if he would have talked to Bloodraven. Like, again, Bloodraven might not like him, but I still can't help but wonder after enough time goes by, especially the sort of charisma he had.
Yeah.
Bloodraven might have wanted to go to the wall based on a dream that Daemon had.
It's possible.
He might have been like, you know what? This is probably what's supposed to happen anyway,
Yeah, no,
you wonder if they
it
talk.
makes perfect sense that they would talk.
Yeah,
I don't
that's a
think
great
there's
point.
any doubt that Bloodraven went down there and talked to him and that they talked about dreams. How can that not come up? Especially if you're Daemon and you're trying to do anything to get out of prison. Probably you bring up your prophetic dreams.
You know what this really gives me vibes of is Varys going to talk to Ned in prison, but not being Varys, like pretending to be someone else.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
because if he goes down as Bloodraven, that might not go so well. But if he goes down as just like some jailer, some friendly jailer, like, let me talk to you, man. Let's have a chat. Ooh, that's pretty cool. We're onto something here. These are fun. Like this is,
or even
this
another prisoner.
Oh yeah, just someone in another cell
with him,
pretending to be another prisoner.
I remember you, Maynard Plumm.
Yeah,
I was there too.
They threw me in jail now. Yeah, that's really cool. These are good. These are good theories. They might be completely off base here, but it fits. It would fit very well. It would work very well. So yeah, and then of course there's this other, like you said, we brought this topic up, the question about whether he's ever been to the Wall. Is that from a dream? Did he see that in a dream? He's like, I know you've gone to the Wall eventually, because he does. He escorts Oh, and he may go there another time. We know at least he goes there once. So that might be another evidence of a dream that Daemon has that is being explained here. And here's a few other comparisons that Nina wrote out for us as Daemon the Younger to Daeron the Drunken comparisons. Like the prophetic dreams, obviously, both sons of talented Targaryen-blooded martial commanders. Both wore the names of recent patriarchs. They're both, like, Daeron was the actual king, and Daeron is the son, or the son of the son. And Daemon, same deal, right? He's the third son, but he's got the name of the father. Yet neither would have anticipated being the heir, right? Because they were really far down. Like, Daeron the Drunken is the son of Maekar. Maekar's the fourth son. So, like, that's why Egg is Aegon the Unlikely, because he's even farther down than Daeron, being his younger brother. And then they have similar aspects in their father figures, like sharing. They're both really dutiful and tough, like meaning Maekar. And father figure for Daemon would be Bittersteel, because he didn't really grow up with his own father that much. Bittersteel's the whole Blackfyre patriarch. So this would be the tough, like, solid, like, demanding, strict kind of guy. So you kind of feel like maybe this was another point of connection between the two of them. So yeah, like as y'all were saying, they would have a lot of interesting conversations. Even their upbringing, they would have a lot, things like that. Even coming down to things like the bullying. Like Nina mentions that Daemon was bullied, and Daeron was teased and picked on. Maybe not by his own family. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe Aerion mocked him. I don't know. But maybe some of his cousins. I don't know. But like he wasn't a guy that is hard to make fun of. In this kind of society. He was kind of in their eyes he was a loser, right?
We had some people in the chat too, like Dornish Dame brought up how that might have been a source of comfort for Daeron, for example, if he had someone to commiserate with, and Daemon. A cousin going through the same thing, and Guilty Undertaker noted that Daemon seems much less bothered by his dreams than Daeron was, and I think a lot of that comes down to that Daemon needed something to grasp onto, to hold on to, that showed his Targaryenness. And,
that's a good call. That's a very good call. I like that idea a lot. Yeah, and you guys are right to bring that up, because Daeron, if Daemon was still alive in prison for a while, Daeron didn't die till 221 at the earliest. He probably died later than that. So he was definitely alive for all this imprisonment of Daemon. So he could have visited him in prison.
When did Daeron die?
We don't know, but after the third Blackfyre. Well, after the third Blackfyre, like 221 or later.
Imagine if Daeron and Daemon talked about their dreams of eggs hatching. Daeron told Egg about it. Like, it could have even been more enforced in Egg's mind.
And King Aerys would want to know about it. He would want to be privy to these conversations. He would want to know about these dreams, because he's the guy researching prophecy. Like,
and I mean, that's what it comes down to, is that Egg obviously does get really into this idea, and he does try something.
Yes,
without a doubt. So, and Aemon is familiar with it too. So clearly, people were talking about it.
Yeah. All the more reason, too, for Aerys to be. Remember at the end, Bloodraven's like, or Dunk asks, "What are you going to execute the Fiddler?" And he's like, "Not my call. It's up to Aerys. I don't think we should, because then they can immediately crown the brother. But it's up to him." That's a really good lead into what we're talking about here. Aerys would be like, "No, don't execute him." One, for the same reasons, the political reasons, but also because I want to hear about his dreams. I'm the prophecy king. Tell me your dreams, dude, cousin.
I'd make a good king, because I'm also interested in people's dreams.
So yeah, this is good. These are very good theories coming out of this. Obviously, none of this is.
I just want to say, Sean, you joked right there, but that would be a good quality in a king, even today.
Curiosity, yeah. Trying to, it's like it's weird to think about now, because we don't have this kind of stuff in the real world, but like that is real in their world. So studying it as if it's a science, or as if it's a thing worth studying, makes tons of sense.
I mean, like, truly, like, let's say the king of England, I don't know, like, whatever, some king came up to me and asked me about my dreams. That tells you that king is probably better than the average one, because they care about the common person.
And to be fair, even without prophecy, there's a lot to be learned from dreams sometimes. Usually it is something going on in someone's mind, some past experience, or some hope they have is kind of coming out through a dream. And that could matter, if you're trying to make a decision about your counselors or subordinates or even yourself, contemplating dreams and their meanings might be valuable.
But really, we just don't ever see Ares.
No, we don't.
We really only have secondhand accounts of him.
Dunk and Egg might eventually put him on screen. He won't die till 221, and there's his 211, so he's just ascended here.
He's scholarly and into prophecy, okay?
Yeah.
That's what we know.
And he's still king during the Third Blackfyre Rebellion, and he's the one that decides not to execute Bittersteel, which really backfires, blackfires. So, anyway, there's more symbolism here with White Walls itself, because one of the comparisons that gets made in terms of bringing up the wall is the White Walls of White Walls is a comparison to the Wall, which also brings up the topic of Kingsguard White and all that. But castle made of snow, snow doesn't work out so well for dragons. This is a dragon hatching dream, and you got a castle made of snow. Those things don't go well together. So it's a bad sign if you're a dream reader. There's different interpretations, but I would say that's a bad sign.
I have to say, just because of other debates in the fandom, whenever there's mention of like snow and we haven't seen in his dreams, I'm like, can it be ash? I just have to think about that.
Okay.
Any time when someone brings up a dream where we do not see it described, just because it's a damn
pretty
prophecy
cool
thing, obviously.
Yeah.
Could it be a bastard from the north that they're dreaming about?
Far in
Maybe
could be
a certain bastard.
It's absolutely possible, because after all, we have the theory that I want to shout out our friend Joe Magician. He's the first person I heard this one from, I think. It's been a while, but we'll give him a shout out anyway. Good job, Joe Magician. That some of these dreamers, like Arion, maybe Daeron, they were dreaming of Daenerys. Like that's why Aerys jumped on the pyre to do the wildfire stuff, because they were seeing visions of Daenerys is jumping on a pyre, and it did work. Like the eggs hatched, that they were seeing visions of that, and they each just through their own arrogance or ego or insanity thought it was themselves. They were seeing themselves in that, which is why Aerys was going to blow up all of King's Landing, things like that.
I definitely have just seen that as like a standard. Like, of course, that's what they were thinking.
Yeah.
Melisandre also at one point says, I wish I could remember. I think it might have been John. Someone asked her, like, what about? I wish I could remember a little better, but I think someone asked her if she saw Azor Ahai.
And she's like, I see only snow.
All I see is snow.
Yeah,
Whenever
yeah.
I see is snow.
Capital S, no.
Yeah. But it does make me think other times when someone is seeing, crystals of water falling, and that maybe that's just the prophecy of their dream being Jon Snow. Or also maybe it's ash. Like even Melisandre, it didn't occur to me, she might have been seeing ash there too. So maybe it's too easy for that to be Jon Snow. I don't know.
Yeah, in the Melisandre case, it's Jon Snow.
Yeah.
In other cases,
I mean, if they're having prophecies
snow,
way
fire
ahead of
and
their
ice
time,
right there.
yeah.
Snow and ash, fire and ice. That's the afterwards, right? First you get fire and ice, then afterwards you have snow and ash after the battle. That's what's left. Yet another clue that comes in this moment is when Gorman's like, you won't repeat anything said up here. Well, that implies that important things were said that shouldn't be repeated.
Well, they sort of were. He thought they were. Because remember, he walks up. He doesn't know what happened, but he knows that there's already been this interaction between the two, between Peak and... the Fiddler and...
he probably noticed the flirting or something to it.
Dunk,
yeah.
And he asked Dunk, he's like, what did he promise you? And Dunk's like, I don't know, a white cloak, a lordship, blue wings. And Dunk's like barely remembering. He doesn't understand what they were talking about.
Yeah,
but
he's so drunk.
He really thinks like he's gonna make this guy a lord. He thinks he really did tell him the whole plot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's why he's like, don't you tell anyone. Does that make sense? He misinterpreted.
He figured, he's wary of how much was said and of what was understood, where in fact it all went over Dunk's head pretty much.
Yeah.
Which Peak wouldn't expect that. It's to be reasonable, to be fair to Peak. Like, why would he? He's like, really? He didn't pick up any of that? All right, well. So as we already discussed, he comes down. Dunk comes back downstairs. And Maynard's like the only one there, not like passed out and sober or whatever. And so we can skip this part. We talked about it setting up, but I do want to add to this. This is when the egg is stolen. And it makes sense that if you're going to do some burglary, you can't pick a much better time than when everyone's passed out drunk. Right? Like they're just partying, drinking. It's like, now's the time. Send the dwarves up the privy shaft, grab that egg. They'll just, the bride and the groom will be passed out drunk from their, consummation or whatever.
That's even another reason Plum Raven might have still been lingering down there. You can like signal the dwarves.
Oh,
the coast is clear or whatever,
Or be there if it goes wrong and be like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Like, what's
Hand
that?
it off to me now or whatever it is, yeah.
So let's start to wrap up today. We've got some fun quotes. We'll do some final takes. We've got a few more, like one or two more questions it looks like we've got down here. And of course, as promised, a rundown on the Jacobite Rebellion. So let's start with a really funny tongue-in-cheek quote here from Maynard. He says, "Bulwer's day is done. Look at him. Past 60, soft and fat, and his right eye is good as blind." At least he has two eyes.
Blood Raven's not out there jousting. Maynard Plumm didn't join the list, so
yeah. And how are you gonna when you're past 60 soft? If you're gonna be past 120, part of a tree, you won't be soft and fat, but you'll be even creepier. You're gonna have leaves, and you're gonna have things growing out your eyeball. Like your missing eye is gonna literally have a thing coming out of it, a tree hole. Yeah. Now here's another one. Sean, read this one. Lord Peake says,
"Bitter steel be buggered," insisted a familiar voice. "No bastard can be trusted, not even him." Is there a piece of that I'm missing?
No, you got it.
"Not even him. A few victories will bring him over the water fast enough."
It's like, okay, wait a minute. No bastard can be trusted, not even him. Didn't you guys rebel and follow a bastard named Daemon? Isn't this whole like, okay. Like you did already. Plus the casual homophobic comment here is ironic too, because they're like the guy they're currently supporting is gay or bisexual.
Yeah.
So it's like you're just come on.
Better still be buggered.
Yeah, so
it's like, can't be buggered.
Yeah. George lays on that particular brand of hypocrisy thick here because it's fitting. You got this hate and privilege and ego. They do blind people to these contradictions. Like it's like, oh well, it's that old adage, right, where someone's being abused, like is being insulted right in front of them, but they don't, like they're talking about people who they're in the same group of. It's like all women are weak or something like that, and you got a woman sitting there going, he's like, well, he's not talking about me. Like,
yeah,
he is. This is blatant. It's the same kind of thing where Gorman Peake's like, I hate bastards except for the one I'm following. He's like, I hate gay people except for this guy. I'm, like my plans are great. Your plans are stupid. Like your plan. This guy. Like they just can't see
what
their
have the Romans ever done for this?
Yeah.
Aside from the aqueducts and aside from the
safe to walk at night, education.
But aside from that, what have they ever done for us?
Yeah. So, and then I love this quote from the Fiddler himself.
Yeah, I remember again on the second read, like, wait a minute, is George mocking me? George is mocking me.
George is mocking all of us.
You might be surprised at what some men can miss.
Got us. Bullseye. Target strike. We called out. Yeah, all of us. Julie says, I wonder if the Targ dreamers tend to dream about other Targs and those close to them like Dunk, or if it's just, like it would kind of make sense if they're dreaming about things that affect them or affect their family. They would dream of Dunk, especially if it's his role in Summerhall, and with Egg and all that.
That wasn't a thought I had too. This is kind of minor, but just thinking about when Daemon told Dunk that he had dreamed of him in the King's Guard, and I bet you have too. And Dunk's like, I have, but I think that Dunk was like, that was a dream, like a thing he aspires to, not like something that happened in his sleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it is interesting how that word dream can be used in different ways like that. Can I look at something real quick?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just wanted to get up to my notes. I just wanted to see if there was something I'd...
There it is.
Nope, got it all.
Got it. Okay, good. All right. Dead air. All right. So comment from who is it? Julie A here, who kind of no, this was Guinevere Greenstones. My bad. The lady weeping and baby Walder Frey running around having a great time gives me enough red wedding flashbacks to seriously contemplate throwing a small child down a well. Yeah, that's the same thing. It's like, how do we find ourselves in this place where we kind of agree with tossing this kid in the well? It's partly because we know what he's going to do. If he was just a random annoying kid, he wouldn't be like, yeah, throw him in the well. But that's where we're at, right? I love it. How did you do that, George? How did you do that? Okay, a few things about the Jacobites. This is pretty cool. Again, one of the single, if not the single heaviest source of historical inspiration for the Blackfyres. 1603, last Tudor monarch, Elizabeth I, dies and is succeeded by her first cousin twice removed. That's James VI of Scotland. This begins the Stuart dynasty in England. 1649, so 46 years later, during the English Civil War, Charles I, that's the son of James VI, and first, is executed after losing badly against Parliament. The British Isles become a commonwealth under the famous Oliver Cromwell, a name most of you probably know already. 1660, so this is a long time later, right? Charles II, so we're all 57 years in now. Charles II, eldest son of Charles I, is restored as King of England and Scotland and Ireland and France, which the English kings were claiming, though they didn't actually have it. They were claiming it. It's kind of back and forth. That's a side topic. And they would keep doing this until 1801. So for a long time. 1685, so another 25 years goes by. Charles II dies. Charles had lots of mistresses and lots of bastards. So here's where the Aegon IV comparison comes in. And he even has a mistress named Barbara Villiers, which Nina suggests might be a Barbara Bracken comp there, which that sure does fit well. But no legitimate children through this mistress. So when he dies, the throne passes to his heir, presumptive his younger brother, James. This new James, the second and the seventh. So there, you got, because he's ruling multiple kingdoms. So you got two titles. It's all so confusing. Like, people think the Daerons and the Aegons are confusing. Nah, this stuff is way harder. So he's is unfortunately a Catholic convert at a time when Catholic-Protestant relations are really bad. Like, they're at some of their worst. So it's pretty bad for this guy to switch sides in terms of building enmity, right? This causes issues. So on top of the religious issue, James is also kind of an absolutist. So he believes in the divine right of kings, which basically means Parliament is to him, no. Parliament, you can't tell me what to do, Parliament. Which is bad because Parliament was powerful enough to go to war to stop a king. So this is no small thing. He's not just pushing aside a governing body with no teeth to it. They can summon armies and stuff. So that's a big deal. So James as king immediately demonstrates both that he is committed to protecting and promoting Catholics and that he doesn't particularly care for having Parliament tell him what to do. This lasts for about 3 years until things finally come to a head. It's like a back and forth of like almost war breaking out, almost thing, but they kind of dial it back down. But then, nope, it comes to a head. James and his queen have a son named James Francis Edward Stuart, who we mentioned earlier, the dude with 4 first names. Now, James had a legitimate Catholic son who would succeed him ahead of his elder Protestant half-sister. So the situation of the succession also comes down to these religious things. Like, you've got a Protestant or a Catholic is going to inherit, and that's a big deal to both sides. November 1688, so now a good 87 years from the start of this tale, William, Prince of Orange, which sounds so happy and friendly, but no, this was a very serious man, very dangerous. This is James's nephew and son-in-law. He's the son of Mary and husband of Mary. Invades England, beginning what becomes known as the Glorious Revolution that we referred to before. William lets James marry his wife and their baby son escape to exile in France while he and Mary are proclaimed joint monarchs, and that always goes well, right? So James is recognized as the rightful king of England, Scotland, and Ireland by his first cousin, Louis XIV, and was allowed, of course, French, and was allowed to live in France for the remainder of his life. James tries one invasion of the former realm, so this is kind of a Blackfyre comp here, but he was defeated in 1690, about a year after invading. He landed in Ireland rather than England, and then kind of came across that way rather than crossing the channel directly. It's kind of unusual, but didn't work out. He dies 11 years later in France, just kind of chilling there. He didn't get it going again. When he dies, France Medina, the homeland of James' second wife, the Papal States, and Spain, all choose to recognize his son as James III and VIII. So just add one to those numbers from before. His supporters in exile become known as the Jacobites, and the Latin, which is after the Latin word for James, Jacobus, right? So it's basically the same name, but confusing because of the translations.
Can I take this chance
Yes.
to say it is Jacobite?
Oh, goodness, Jacobite. My bad. Sorry, y'all. Jacobite.
So, if you were going to message Aziz correcting him, don't, because
Yes.
he's now been corrected.
Yes. Sorry about that, folks.
I kept saying Jacobite, too, just because of our cat Jake, and I just want to say Jake for everything. It felt kind of offensive to switch that.
That's funny because I've only ever read this word. This is one of the only words you've only ever read before. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, good correction. Okay. So in Britain, Mary and William die without children, and Anne, James II's younger daughter, is by 1714 also dying childless. So in an attempt to find a Protestant heir, Parliament declares in 1701 that no Catholic could sit the throne. Except the first 36 Stuart relations alive in 1700 are all Catholic. So, basically everyone with the claim to the throne is a Catholic, except for these couple people that they're maybe aiming for. So in 1714, when Anne dies, the crown passes to Anne's second cousin, George, Elector of Hanover, a German prince who spoke not a word of English. In 1715, James Francis Edward Stuart, again, that awesome name, we'll just call him JFES, attempts an invasion of Scotland, but unfortunately, by the time he lands, the pro-Jacobite forces have already been defeated twice, and he stays only a few months in Scotland before returning to France. It doesn't work out. So this is kind of like the way the fourth Blackfyre rebellion goes, where they just show up and they're like, yeah, let's go, and everyone's like, I'm kind of tired of you guys. You had your chance. So but they won't let him back in France because Louis XIV dies in the midst of this, and he was kind of like their benefactor. But the new French king's like, I don't know about that. So in 1719, fast forward again, 4 more years, James marries Clementine Sobieska, a Polish princess, and together they have 2 sons, Charles Edward Stuart. So the same name, but without the James, one of the names, Edward, without the Edward. No, without the Francis. Sorry, without the Francis. The so-called Bonnie Prince Charlie was his nickname. And Henry Benedict Stuart, later called the Cardinal Duke of York, since he becomes a Catholic cardinal, and the title Duke of York is traditionally given to the second son of the King of England. And that's a normal sort of like the Prince of Dragonstone, but the Duke of York for the second son rather than Prince of Dragonstone for the first son. In 1745, so now we're 144 years past the origin of this, Charles Edward Stuart leads the most successful of the Jacobite uprisings, the so-called 45. Despite significant early successes, however, capturing Edinburgh and invading England as far south as Derby, Charles was defeated at the Battle of Culloden, the last pitched battle fought on British soil. Okay, so let that sink. There's more to this, but let me let that sink in. Some people have questioned the realism of the Blackfyre rebellions continuing over so many generations. This is way more generations.
Yeah.
This is more than twice as long. Way more than twice. This is like 4 or 5 times longer. So
it's a constant theme in European history.
These claims just keep passing down. You can trace your ancestors with solid ancestry records. Yeah, you can. Yeah. So the defeat of that rebellion in 1745 marks the effective end of Jacobitism as a real political force, while France does consider using the Stuarts in a planned invasion, sort of like as a puppet, setting them up and then ruling behind the throne a bit, or at least getting the you install someone in power and they owe you favors, right? The plan is abandoned though after Charles shows up late, drunk and belligerent in a planning meeting, so he's just kind of a waste. So similar to John the Fiddler without the belligerence, I guess. James Francis Edward Stuart dies in 1766, leaving his son Charles as the new Jacobite heir, though he is not recognized by any other sovereigns. Even the Pope doesn't recognize him, because one of the popes did before, or at least one pope did before. Although Charles, because of the Catholic Protestant stuff, of course, the Pope obviously wants a Catholic. Although Charles marries in 1772, he has no legitimate children, only an illegitimate daughter by his Scottish mistress. Charles dies in 1788, succeeded as the Jacobite claimant by his brother Henry Benedict Stuart. These names are it's like Daemon, yeah, right? There's all these Daemons and Hagons and Aegons. Yeah, it's the same thing. Henry himself never marries in his last years, impoverished by the French Revolution, in which he lost many of his benefits, his benefits from being staying with the noble, like living. They hooked him up with a salary for being highborn and just living with them. But the revolution,
Sponsors or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah, there you go, yeah. But the French Revolution overturned a lot of that. So he was still supported by an annuity from the British Crown.
Ironically.
Yeah, right. Like geez, talk about being born into the right family. Like, we're just gonna give you money for the rest of your life, but this is a sign that they don't see him as threatening, because they would not give him money if they thought there were still a chance that he would like try to take the throne or something. But clearly, no. At that point, it was just a long gone thing. But interestingly, by the rules of succession, the Jacobite heir today would be Franz, Duke of Bavaria, also heir to the defunct Kingdom of Bavaria. So that's pretty cool. Thanks a lot, Nina. That was awesome. That was all her writing there. Like I said at the beginning, we're going to use a few more of her notes this time than usual. We always use a good bit of them, but this right here alone is a huge chunk. I enjoyed that. I didn't know it very well. We have our Blackfyre series, but I didn't delve into this much at all. I'm Stephen Atwell, Jim McGee, and I almost called them brothers there. Jim Atwell and Stephen
married.
Atwell. Yeah. Which name would they take? Would it be Stephen McGeehan or would it be Jim Atwell?
Definitely Atwell. That's a better name.
But Stephen McGeehan has a sort of...
It does kind of
They
rhyme,
take
yeah.
each other's name.
They would switch. Okay. Anyway, shout out to our two great friends there, as well as to Nina, all helping and supporting the show, making it so much better with these great takes, these historical takes. We love connecting real world history to Song of Ice and Fire. There's so much to it. George is well read. We love history, so it just fits so well. And we hope you enjoy it. Okay. Sean, any final thoughts for today, or will we just pick it up next time?
I will think of something as soon as we finish. I'll think of something. In fact, there was something you wanted to mention last time. Do you remember?
That was the blood. Yeah, that was Who Shot Bloodraven, or Who Shot Fireball. So we
Fireball,
did cover
that's
that.
right, yeah.
I almost said Who Shot JR. Remember from Dallas, that old
Bloodraven.
Yeah, Bloodraven shot JR too. Yeah, he was trying to take over the I don't know what
dynasty.
He shot Burns too.
He shot Mr.
And
Burns.
framed a baby.
Yeah, he wanted Maggie to ascend to the throne, actually. That was his long-term plan. But so, as usual, we mentioned the Three-Eyed Bloodraven episode kind of indirectly here. Though this one we more referred to him being one-eyed than three-eyed. But hey, they're both true in their own ways.
You know what I did think of? Another Avatar parallel. One of the antagonist characters who is sort of, torn in his ideas of what loyalty or honor are, has this burn scar on his face.
Oh,
There's
nice.
like another parallel there.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, right on.
I guarantee I'm going to think of three more as soon as we're done.
Zuko, right?
Zuko, that's it. Yeah.
I know
Nice.
because Christina and Brian's dog is a big spot.
Oh,
His
yeah.
name's Zuko.
Cool.
Shay is referring to Christina, who was our guest for the Dublin trip episode, and of course our co-traveler, and Brian, aka Brian E., our good friend.
Who did
Shout out to them.
Westeros? An American musical.
Damn right. He is quite a talented man for putting all that together, and shout out to him and all the great performers. Westeros, an American musical, watchable on YouTube. It's got over 160,000 views.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
awesome.
awesome.
It's done
That's
really
awesome.
well. Obviously, as you could guess from the title, it is,
It's based on Hamilton. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really good, and the number of views absolutely helps suggest that.
Hamilton probably doesn't even have 160,000 views.
There's probably no copies of it on YouTube. It would be taken down. Anyway, so thanks everyone. Check out our related episodes on this if you haven't already, or you want a refresher. The Blackfyre episodes, of course, Summer Hall, Three-Eyed Bloodraven, other stuff like that. We got a lot. We got lots of background. We've been doing this for a while, folks, and we'll keep doing it for even longer, hopefully. Thanks again to everyone who came to watch live. Thanks again to everyone who listens afterwards and sends their thoughts and or comments. We really appreciate the community involvement. It's very helpful, and we just genuinely enjoy it. Thanks to Sean and Ashaya and Rita for being around and also making this great. Thanks to Nina for her excellent takes. Thanks to our Facebook mods for handling the business over there. Our Facebook group is pretty active. We got lots of good stuff going on there. Encourage you to join our other discussion / sites, places to hang out with your fellow Westorians, Discord, Slack, Flick, and of course you can interact with us on Twitter and through email as well.
Follow me, Dancing Sean, on Twitter.
At Dancing Sean, that's right. Do it.
I got a YouTube channel also.
Yeah, follow Dancing Sean's YouTube channel, his movie reviews. I know you'll be firing up another batch of those at some point in the near future, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have any idea, like, what movies you might want to do, or any sort of categories, or are you just kind of still thinking about it?
What's going to be next? Are you going to just dive right back into that? It comes back soon.
I want to do more movies before I get to The Boys.
Okay.
The Boys are like more involved, like, hour or 2 episodes.
Yeah,
but I'm trying to do like minute-long movie previews. And
Cool.
I did like all of the Academy Award nominees from last year, and I did a couple from the podcast with TMK, or TMC rather, with Tommy.
Yeah, TKOK Podcast Network.
yeah.
Yeah, shout out to them.
And there was like a poll of which movies we were going to cover, and I did those different movies. But I want to do a lot of like classic movies, like movies that probably most people have seen, but the type that if you haven't seen, you feel like you should, So,
yeah.
But there's probably like dozens of that. Probably everyone has like a dozen movies that they feel like they need to see. So I'm going to give like little synopsises of what they're like, so you can choose,
right on.
is this going to be up my alley? So I'm going to do some sort of classics like that. I might have sort of a sci-fi slant just because I got a Contact and Empire Strikes Back poster recently. So I have a good theme going there.
Well, whatever you end up doing, we'll be checking it out and encouraging others to do the same. So we'll circle back to that when it's more tangible. And also thanks to Michael Klarfeld, aka claradox.de. That's his website. You can see his work behind us and his maps, and of course with the video intro and so many other things around the fandom. He's becoming somewhat ubiquitous. That's a good thing. Kevin MacLeod as well. We must give him great thanks for the Valar Rereadis intro music, as well as to Joey Townsend and Jesse Koval for the regular History of Westeros music. Thanks as well to our Bengineer for the sound quality assistance. And go check out our friends at Here Be Dragons. They're doing Star Wars Rebels Season 1. Special shout out to John Webster. It was his birthday this week. And last week, or the week before last, we didn't mention Here Be Dragons, which we usually do. And that was just a really unfortunate thing because John was sitting right there. And I'm like,
It's
crap,
his fault. It's his
I didn't
fault.
mention John was sitting like he's in the Rita single, studio audience spot, basically. So, sorry, John, but you're a great dude. It was great for you to visit us. And everybody check out Star Wars Rebels.
Yeah,
Season
John
1
came and
on
we
Here Be
went
Dragons.
to the Center for Puppetry Arts to see the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance exhibit. It was a nice little, 2-day trip. We drove on up.
Yeah, the Puppetry Arts have a really nice center here, have a really nice exhibit for Dark Crystal. So,
Yes, I highly recommend it. It is open through the end of October, and even when it's not open, they have other things from Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and the whole Jim Henson's area. It's not a big
Fraggle Rock.
museum. Yeah, Fraggle Rock. It's not a big museum, but it's really nice. I like to go there and support it. It's cute.
Pepperjack loves Fraggle Rock. Okay, everyone, thanks again, and we'll see you next time for more Valar Rereadis.